Chapter 1186. Bye-bye. Under the might of the Tao of the Five Elements, not even the sky's supremes Yi Zichen was fighting had a good ending. They were either struck by lightning, pierced by arrows, or burned by fire. In any case, these heavenly sovereigns that were so glorious before everyone looked pitiful at this moment. Chun Jianan and Yin, who weren't too surprised. The Tao of the Five Elements was on the same level as the Tao of eternal life and destruction. It was only natural for it to be this strong. However, the true strength of the Tao of the Five Elements lay in its infinite variations. Countless combinations could achieve countless different effects. Fortunately, Yi Zichen had only touched the basics. He hadn't yet reached the point where he could fuse the Tao of the Five Elements together. Otherwise, these Supremes would have suffered even worse fates. You can all withdraw. When Chun Jianan and Yin Hu stepped forward, they had their clansmen withdraw. Jackdaw waved at the demons as well. All of you come to me. The demons who hadn't participated in Yi Zichen's fight fared much better than the humans in Yao. They had no intention of taking his life, and all they'd done was defend themselves against the shockwaves of his attacks. As a result, none of them had sustained any injuries. Your Excellency, the humans in Yao have already taken action. Are we just going to keep waiting? Said one of the demons. Jackdaw smiled indifferently when he heard that. If they want to fight, let them. I absolutely won't bully them with numbers. You should thank me. If I told you to attack just now, you wouldn't have fared any better than the humans in Yao. You might even have suffered worse injuries. But the 3,000 devil kings of our devil race might have been killed by him. So what if he killed them? It's just 3,000 demon kings. He hasn't even become a supreme yet. So what's there to worry about? Jackdaw snorted coldly. Just sit tight and watch. If the Xin Yuan's sword falls into the humans or Yao's hands, we'll snatch it back. If the two of them can't beat that brat, I'll give him enough time to recover, then fight him one-on-one. The Tao of the Five Elements. I've never fought someone like him before. Under Chun Jianan and Yin Hu's orders, the human and demon experts retreated. Yi Zichen was just an Earth Supreme. In their eyes, he was nothing more than a plaything they could squash as they pleased. Never would they have guessed this plaything would give them such a pleasant surprise. Dragging their injured bodies to the side, their gazes landed on Chun Jianan and the others. I thought you two would be able to endure for a long time. When Yi Zichen saw Chun Jianan and Yi Zichen arrive, he looked at them coldly. These two were the final big boss. There was still a big boss of the devil race that hadn't appeared yet. Yi Zichen glanced discreetly at Jackdaw and realized that it had no intention of attacking. Just now, when the human clan and the demon clan besieged him, the devil clan did not attack him. They want to be the fisherman who benefits from the fight between the sandpiper and the clam? Yi Zichen frowned. When Chun Jianan was 50 meters away from Yi Zichen, he stopped. His blade crackled with lightning. Yi Zichen followed the blade's edge and saw the character Shao engraved on its hilt. You're from the Shao family? Yi Zichen frowned. So you know the Lightning Emperor's Shao family? Chun Jianan snorted arrogantly. That's right. I'm a member of the Lightning Emperor's Shao family. Shao, who is my master, and I'm his chief disciple. I never would have guessed the Shao family had an outsider too. This world really was small. Before descending to the lower realms, Yi Zichen had run into Shao Hu and killed two of his disciples right in front of him. To think he'd run into someone from the Shao family again. And this guy was also Shao Hu's disciple? Why can't I? Chun Jianan smiled coldly, and the lightning around his blade grew even more blinding. I have to admit, you've given us quite a pleasant surprise. At first, I thought you were only skilled in a few of the five elements. I never would have guessed you were proficient in all five. The Tao of the Five Elements posed no small threat to our people. Given your strength as an Earth Supreme, you managed to injure so many Sky Supremes. You should be proud of yourself. However, that's as far as you go. Tell us your name. Given that you chose the Tao of the Five Elements, you're worthy of us knowing your name, said Yin Hu. If I tell you my name, I'm afraid some of you will explode. Yi Zichen grinned arrogantly and touched his lips. My name is Yi Zichen. In the lower realms, everyone calls me Grandmaster Yi. As soon as he said that, Yi Zichen looked at Chun Jianan playfully. As expected, as soon as he said the words, Grandmaster Yi, Chun Jianan's expression changed dramatically. So it's you. However, Chun Jianan quickly composed himself and swung his sword. Then I'll be taking revenge for my junior apprentice brother. Who never would have guessed that the instant Chun Jianan spoke, he'd already swung his sword at Yi Zichen. However, the sword position wasn't particularly tricky. Yi Zichen, who'd been tense all this time, easily dodged. You want to take revenge for your junior apprentice brother with just that? Your master, Xiao Hu, was there, but he couldn't save your junior apprentice brother either. You, stop dreaming. Someone from a northern divine mountain intervened, so my master couldn't do anything. Now, there's no one from the northern divine mountain present. Your only fate is death. Are you sure? Yi Zichen smiled, then stretched lazily as if he didn't care at all. How about this? Let's make a bet. If you can't kill me, you'll be my dog. How about that? You have a sharp tongue. After learning that Yi Zichen was Grandmaster Yi, Chun Jianan's fury reached an uncontrollable peak. He'd been especially close to Xiao Zhan. When he'd first heard of Xiao Zhan's death, his first thought had been revenge, but his master had sent him here to fight for the Xianyuan sword. Now that he'd run into the man in question, he was determined to kill him. The lightning on his sword soared into the heavens. Surprisingly, it connected to the heavens and interfered with Yi Zichen's Tao of the 5 elements. It was as if the tip of his sword was connected to the heavens, lightning as a conductor. A thunderstorm gathered power, ready to explode. Tch, this looks much fiercer than my lightning. Yi Zichen muttered to himself. He clearly cultivated the Tao of the 5 elements, and his lightning should be the purest of all. However, Chun Jianan's lightning was far purer than his. Obviously, there were still many details he hadn't grasped yet. Explode. At the same time, Chun Jianan roared angrily, and the thunderstorm in the heavens exploded. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb when he saw the lightning explode in the sky. He scratched his head and chuckled. Chapter 1187. They've been discovered. Yi Zichen's words were like a cool breeze blowing into Chun Jian and the others' ears. Then, they discovered that Yi Zichen had disappeared from their line of sight, just like the Xianyuan sword. They couldn't find any trace of him. How did he disappear? All the Sky Supremes spread their divine senses outwards. Their divine senses wove together to form a seamless net. Wind, sand, water. Their divine senses disintegrated all the elements in the world, but they couldn't find Yi Zichen's location. Chun Jianan's face was ashen. Yi Zichen's mocking gaze pierced his heart like a thorn. He let him escape? He was a majestic 9th stage Sky Supreme, only a step away from becoming a diviner. Yet he'd let an ant who'd just become an Earth Supreme escape? This was absolutely the greatest humiliation he'd ever suffered, a stain on his life that he'd never be able to erase. Impossible! Chun Jianan roared inwardly. While fighting Yi Zichen, he'd already sealed off the surrounding space. Yi Zichen couldn't have just disappeared for no reason. He was absolutely still here. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, his divine sense had already enveloped the entire wildlands. Even if he had to dig 3 feet underground, he'd find Yi Zichen. This is too frightening. Yi Zichen stood on the first floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda and patted his chest in trepidation. Although the Tao of the 5 elements was a peerless great Tao, it was still no match for a 9th stage Sky Supreme like Chun Jianan. The difference in cultivation was simply too vast. He really wasn't in the wastelands yet. In fact, he was still where he'd disappeared. He'd simply used the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's transformation to transform into an unremarkable speck of dust to escape the Sky Supreme's pursuit and force them to retreat. Master! The instant Yi Zichen appeared, Meng Huairong and Jiao Qi walked up to him. Xianyuan Xiang followed them. This was her first time inside the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, and she was filled with curiosity. She could sense that this was clearly just a spatial divine artifact, yet people could live here and the laws of heaven and earth were the same as the outside world. She hadn't expected that after 100 years, Yi Zichen would be so lucky. Sister Xiang, please don't mind what I said at that time. Yi Zichen smiled apologetically towards Xinyuan Xiang. He knew that his words were rather hurtful. Forget it. I won't lower myself to your level. I'm a great man and won't hold it against you. Xinyuan Xiang pretended to be angry and wrinkled her nose. What's the situation outside? Yi Zichen didn't explain. He simply waved his right hand, and a screen appeared in front of him. The screen displayed the situation outside the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. The situation doesn't look too good, Xinyuan Xiang said. Of course, those heavenly sovereigns are all here for you. If they can't get their hands on you, will they just give up? Asked Yi Zichen. As expected, it's hard to abandon my natural beauty. So many people want me. Xinyuan Xiang put on a particularly narcissistic pose, stroking her hair coquettishly. Yi Zichen was truly speechless. He ignored her and stared intently at the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's curtains. Hurry up and go. You can't even find me, so what's the point of wasting time? In his heart, he prayed incessantly. Given the current situation, the only way out was to wait for the heavenly supremes to retreat. TCH, Brother Chun, this won't do. You let an Earth Supreme escape right under your nose? Jackdaw chuckled. When Yi Zichen disappeared, he'd been astonished as well. He'd searched the area with his divine awareness, but to no avail. Don't just watch the show. If he's gone, you demons won't get the Xinyuan sword either, snorted Chun Jianan. Then we won't get it. The Xinyuan sword isn't particularly useful to us demons anyway, sneered Jackdaw. When Chun Jianan heard that, he froze inexplicably. The demons really did want the Xinyuan sword, but it wasn't necessary. Compared to the Yao and gods, the Xinyuan sword wasn't a high priority. If I can't get the Xinyuan sword, don't even think about getting the Qiyu sword, countered Chun Jianan. Then let's see. My hands just happen to be itchy. How about we give it a try right here? Before he'd even finished speaking, Jackdaw's Sky Supreme aura burst forth. The monstrous demonic aura made the supremes of the god race and the demon race feel somewhat uncomfortable. Chun Jianan was also somewhat embarrassed by the other party's attitude of attacking at the slightest disagreement. Attacking was definitely irrational. How could he have said something like that just now? Now, he was in a difficult position to get off. What's there to try? The Xinyuan sword hasn't even fallen into our hands yet. All right, enough talk. I'm sure the Xinyuan sword and its wielder are still nearby. Let's focus on finding them. Inhu stepped forward to smooth things over. Chun Jianan took the opportunity to snort and ignore Jackdaw. Found it. At this moment, a man suddenly shouted from within the demon race. A split second later, twin hammers appeared in his hands. He viciously swung them at the ground. Boom! The hammers smashed into the ground, shattering it into nothingness. Only a single stone was left unscathed by the hammers. It lay peacefully in the huge pit created by the hammers. They found it. Yi Zichen stood within the Yao Ceiling Pagoda and frowned. Then he heard Chun Jianan's sinister voice from outside. Keep hiding. Since they'd already found him, there was no point in hiding. Yi Zichen simply sent out his divine sense. You got some skill, huh? You even found me? You're just an Earth Supreme. How far can you possibly hide? If you know what's good for you, hurry up and surrender. Otherwise, even if you resist stubbornly, you won't be able to escape death, said Chun Jianan, his gaze sinister. Chun Jianan's gaze was sinister, and his heart was filled with jealousy. A spatial divine artifact. In the god realm, spatial divine artifacts, especially those that could carry people, were extremely rare. Although he was a 9th stage Sky Supreme, he'd never gotten his hands on one. But this puny Earth Supreme had not only won the Xinyuan sword's favor, but also the protection of a spatial divine artifact. This infuriated him to no end. In the eyes of others, he'd always been a proud son of heaven with heaven-defying luck. But today, in front of Yi Zichen, he was nothing. However, in the face of Chun Jianan's threats, Yi Zichen simply laughed. Do you take me for an idiot? Or is there something wrong with your head? Yi Zichen stood within the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, his eyes filled with disdain. Do you think I won't die if I go out? If you're so strong, come in and kill me. Chun Jiannan's fury reached the heavens. Thunder rumbled through the air, and the winds howled in response to his fury. Chapter 1188. Expensive demon avatars, he's scaring me. Did you see that? He's scaring me. Yi Zichen glared at the people around him with an exaggerated expression. Are you kidding me? Am I supposed to be scared? This kind of person is really too despicable. He glared at Chun Jiannan, who had a ferocious expression on his face, and sent his spiritual sense out of the Yao ceiling pagoda. Then hurry up and kill me. All right, I'll satisfy you. This time, Chun Jiannan couldn't be bothered to waste his breath. He swung his divine sword at Yi Zichen's Yao ceiling pagoda as if his life depended on it. In truth, Yi Zichen felt a little apprehensive. Although he'd been in possession of the Yao ceiling pagoda for a while, he didn't know how strong its defenses were. Dong! When Chun Jiannan's first strike landed, the Yao ceiling pagoda was fine. The second strike, the third strike. After chopping for an hour, the Yao ceiling pagoda was still unscathed. Whoa! As expected of the five elements' great emperor's Yao ceiling pagoda, as expected of Emperor Hades' handiwork. Not bad. Yi Zichen couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. This sort of astonishing defense made him completely relax. Even Chun Jiannan, who had been swinging his sword countless times, couldn't keep up with the huge consumption of his divine power. He stopped attacking the Yao ceiling pagoda and took out a pill to recover his divine power. This time, Yi Zichen was a bit unwilling when he saw that the other party had stopped. Can you do it or not? Come in and kill me. Harder. Chun Jiannan, who was sitting cross-legged outside, recovering his god power, almost lost control of his god power when he heard those words. After a long time, he finally suppressed his anger. After recovering 30% of his divine power, he walked to the Yao ceiling pagoda. However, this time, he did not swing the sword as if his life depended on it. If he could not make this spatial god tool collapse after an hour, then even if he swung the sword for a year, the result would still be the same. The defense of your spatial god artifact is very shocking. Unexpectedly, Chun Jiannan was no longer as angry as before. A faint smile appeared on his face as he looked at the speck of dust beneath his feet. With my strength, it would be difficult for me to break through your defense. I admit that. Did he admit defeat? Yi Zichen couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Since you know you can't break it, why aren't you leaving? Do you want to spend the new year with me? If I can't get the Xinyuan sword, of course I won't leave. Chun Jiannan said warmly. Although I can't break through your defense, you can't escape from me either. If you want to waste time with me, I can stay here to accompany you. As he spoke, Chun Jiannan sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes to rest. When the other Supremes heard this, they also came to a realization. They were too focused on what was in front of them, and desperately wanted to break through the Yao ceiling pagoda's defenses and snatch the Xinyuan sword. Not being able to break through the defense made them very depressed, but they had forgotten. They couldn't break through, but there was no way Yi Zichen could leave the pagoda either. The Supremes immediately began to divide up the work. They couldn't keep using their divine senses to lock onto the dust that the Yao ceiling pagoda had turned into. This would be extremely damaging to their minds. However, they might not have much here, but they had a lot of people just change shifts. Yi Zichen's smile froze. Sure enough, what he'd been most worried about had happened. These guys wanted to waste time with him. Young master, what should we do now? Meng Huairong and Jiao Qi knit their brows. Yi Zichen licked his lips and glanced at the seated Supremes. All right, didn't you want to waste time? Then go ahead and waste time. So long as I open the second floor, you'll all die. Yi Zichen's eyes flashed with cold light. Then he waved his hands and snorted. Find me a quiet room. I'm going into seclusion. Find me one too, said Xinyuan Xiang. Who knows, once I fully fuse with my godhead, I might be of some help to you. Yi Zichen sat cross-legged in his private room. He was currently roughly a first-stage Earth Supreme. Although he'd achieved initial success in the 5 elements, he still couldn't open the second floor. It was obvious that there was a limit to how much power he could use to open the door. Wanting to improve his cultivation through comprehending the Tao arts of the 5 elements was obviously not too realistic under the current circumstances. You want to waste time with me? Yizichin rolled his eyes, then took out a pitch-black secret tome. It was none other than the Devil Dharma body he'd stolen from the warlock in the time corridor. Forming a Dharma body was the only way for Supremes to ascend to divinity, but in truth, less than 10% of Supremes could truly form a Dharma body. The resources required to form a Dharma body were simply too vast. Ordinary people couldn't afford it all. Most of those who could form a Dharma body were descendants of large family clans, or perhaps they relied on their own willpower and time to gather the necessary resources. Of course, the higher the investment, the higher the return. Those who could form a Dharma body, even the weakest of Dharma bodies, would be peerless among Supremes. The first thing Yizichin saw was the materials he needed to form a Dharma body. Next were the things he needed to pay attention to when forming a Dharma body. 100-tail grass, heavenly god fruit, 10,000-year black jade. The dazzling array of ingredients dazzled Yizichin. Even with his vast knowledge and experience, he'd never even heard of many of them. For example, there was one ingredient, devil fruit. Didn't Luffy eat it in one piece? This was a necessary ingredient for forming a Devil Dharma body. Didn't that mean that once he used it, his Dharma body would become an eraser? Jiaoqi. There was no point in looking around. Whether or not he could form a Dharma body depended on whether the Yao Ceiling Pagoda had enough materials. Master. Jiaoqi walked in. Yizichin tossed the secret tome into Jiaoqi's hands. Let's see if we have enough materials to form a Dharma body. A Devil Dharma body? Jiaoqi arched his brows when he saw the secret tome's cover. There were 108 Dharma bodies. He'd never heard of such a thing before. Then he took another look at the materials, and he was completely dumbfounded. Was he really forming a supreme Dharma body? These materials were enough to form 10 Dharma bodies. As far as he could remember, he'd never seen a Dharma body that required such a huge amount of materials. What's more, the materials were all extremely rare and precious. For example, 10,000-year black jade. Black jade itself was precious, but he needed 10,000-year black jade and 150 kilograms of it. Heavenly god fruit was an ingredient for refining diviner pills. It could increase a cultivator's chances of breaking through to the diviner level by 30%, but he needed 20 of these precious materials. 200 pieces of 1,000-year divine wood, 6 pieces of exquisite divine ink, 1 for each element of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, 1 for a demon god's heart. Am I dreaming? Even the steady Jiao Qi gasped in shock when he saw these materials. If he sold these materials, even diviners could buy dozens of them as slaves. But these precious materials were only enough to form a Dharma body. Chapter 1189. Closed-door training, young master. After a while, Jiaoqi smiled at Yizichin in astonishment. Even though he was a 9th-stage Earth Supreme, his right hand was trembling as he held the Devil Dharma body. Yes, it was really shaking. Even a celestial would tremble in fear at the sight of such an expensive material, let alone a 9th Dan supremacy. Is there a problem? Yizichin didn't have a clear definition of the value of these materials. Although there were many materials inside, and he knew that they were expensive, he had never seen the cost of other sovereign celestial bodies, nor did he feel that the cost of his demon celestial body was expensive. Yes, even if Yizichin was the master of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, Jiaoqi had no choice but to give this answer without hesitation. Then he swallowed his saliva and laughed dryly. Young master, your sovereign celestial body shouldn't be within the 108 celestial bodies. What's wrong with that? Yizichin didn't understand. Of course that's not a problem. In the Great Thousand Realms, even a ruler wouldn't dare say that the 108 avatars are all the avatars. There are definitely some that aren't in the rankings, replied Jiaoqi. Then what is your problem? Yizichin looked at him. The problem is the cost of your avatar is too high. As soon as he finished speaking, Jiaoqi, who was not good with words, could no longer keep his mouth shut. For an ordinary Dharmakaya, the black jade is a necessary item, but it's enough if it's 100 years old. A few dozen kilograms is enough. But this avatar of yours needs 150 kilograms of black jade and it's 10,000 years old. I suspect that the entire god race doesn't even have 500 kilograms of black jade. There's also the 1,000-year-old divine wood and the heavenly god fruit. These are treasures that can be sold for tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of celeste in an auction house. But your avatar is like cabbages. Also, the more Jiao Qi spoke, the more agitated he became. It was as if his mouth could not stop ridiculing. Previously, Yi Zichen didn't know how much the Devil Dharma body cost. But after hearing Jiao Qi's explanation, he had a pretty good idea. However, he understood the principle of high investment and high return. If he could create such a Dharmakaya, it would definitely be stronger than other Dharmakayas. What he needed to know now was whether there were enough materials in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. However, before he could say anything, Jiao Qi had already made his decision. There's no way to create this avatar of yours. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda doesn't have enough resources. Yi Zichen arched his brows. Not enough? Definitely not enough. This is only the first floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, and the beasts imprisoned here are all at the Earth Supreme level. Even materials like the heavenly god fruit and the 10,000-year black jade would be useless here, said Jiao Qi speechlessly. This reply was like a bolt from the blue to Yi Zichen. Qin Jiannan and the others were waiting outside the Yao Ceiling Pagoda like tigers watching their prey. It was obvious that they wouldn't leave until he left. This Devil Dharma technique was the only thing he could do in the near future. However, the result Jiao Qi gave him was that he did not have enough materials to forge a Dharma technique. Isn't it over now? Yi Zichen's mouth fell open, but he didn't know what to say. He waved his right hand, and a screen appeared in the room. Above the screen was a view of the situation outside the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. The divine race, Yao race, and demon race seemed to have reached some kind of agreement, and they really did dispatch people to monitor him. As soon as Yi Zichen spread his divine sense outwards, he sensed several auras locking onto him. Hurry up and come out. The instant he sensed Yi Zichen's divine sense, Chun Jiannan said without even opening his eyes, "Didn't you want to waste time? Then let's waste time." With that, Yi Zichen retracted his divine sense. His gaze was solemn. He really was in a bit of a pickle now. Jiao Qi. Yes, sir, replied Jiao Qi immediately. Go to the first floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda and bring me all the pills that can increase one's divine power. They're willing to wait, aren't they? Have them stand guard outside. Once I open the second floor, they won't be able to escape. Understood. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. During this time, Yi Zichen hadn't taken even half a step out of his secret room. While he took pills to increase his cultivation, he also studied the Tao of the 5 elements. Jiao Qi, have some fruit. A beautiful woman walked over with a platter of fruit. She was none other than one of the 3 leaders of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's first floor, Meng Huairong. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda was a separate space, and there were quite a few fruit trees inside. These fruits had been plucked from those trees. You're here. Jiao Qi nodded calmly, then plucked an immortal fruit from the platter. However, he held it in his hand for a long time without putting it into his mouth. Master, you've already been in seclusion for 3 years, haven't you? Asked Jiao Qi. It's been more than 3 years. Meng Huairong nodded. Are you worried about him? At our level, it's possible to go into seclusion for decades, or even centuries. He's only been in seclusion for 3 years. What's there to worry about? Of course I'm not worried about him, said Jiao Qi with a frown. I'm worried about the people outside. He glanced at the curtains. Even after 3 years, Chun Jiannan and the others were still standing guard outside the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Just let them wait. They can't open the Yao Ceiling Pagoda anyway. But not long ago, I heard one of them say they're going to invite a diviner expert over. The difference between a celestial being and a supreme being is huge. What if they manage to break through the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's defensive restrictions? Jiao Qi said. Diviners? They went looking for them. Meng Huairong was shocked. Outside the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, 3 years had passed, but their obsession with the Xinyuan sword still hadn't worn off. During these 3 years, the Sky Supremes all looked exhausted. Although they changed shifts to rest, they'd used their divine sense so much that it wasn't something they could recover from. Among them, Jackdaw was the most energetic. His obsession with the Xianyuan sword wasn't that strong to begin with. His focus was on Chun Jianan and Yin Hu. All he had to do was interrupt them the moment they obtained the Xianyuan sword. How embarrassing. They actually went back to look for reinforcements. Chun Jianan wasn't present. 3 years seemed to have worn away his patience. Not long ago, he'd returned to the God Realm to find his master and break open the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Yin Hu had also notified the Yao Diviners. The only ones who hadn't made a move were the demons. Jackdaw, are you sure you don't want the higher-ups to send a diviner down? Asked Cain. What's there to shout about? Even I find it embarrassing to send a diviner, said Jackdaw disdainfully. What? Are you worried they'll attack us? Chapter 1190. Not even diviners. It's too late to shout. They're already here. When he sensed their supreme auras, Jackdaw smiled calmly and shrugged. At the same time, he rose to his feet and bowed to the people in the sky. Although he considered everyone beneath his notice, he didn't care about diviners at all. Even so, he still had to abide by the most basic rules. The other Supremes followed Jackdaw's lead and bowed to the sky. Not long after, 3 figures descended from the sky. One of them was Chun Jianan of the Shun race. The other 2 were the diviners he had invited from the Shun race, and the demon race expert Yin who had invited. If I recall correctly, the last time I came to the lower realms was tens of thousands of years ago. The celestial realm expert from the celestial race muttered softly as he took a step forward. His entire person landed right in front of the group of Supremes. Yin Hu rushed over to greet the Yao Diviner. When the 2 diviners landed, they looked at Jackdaw. Sensing the gazes of these 2 celestial beings, the devil race paragons all lowered their heads. You're Jackdaw, right? Asked the God race diviner. That's me, Senior. Jackdaw looked up at the God race diviner and chuckled. When the diviner noticed his expression, he nodded and smiled. I never would have guessed the demons would send you. Why didn't I see Han Sure? Brother Chun and Brother Yin have already invited you. You're as strong as my father. If you can break through, even my father wouldn't be able to do anything. If you can't, my father won't be able to do anything. That's why I didn't bother him. Jackdaw laughed. Your way of thinking is quite strange. The last time I met your father was 100,000 years ago. I thought I'd see him again. Unfortunately, once you return to the demons, send my regards to your father. This junior will remember. As they spoke, the God race diviner said no more to Jackdaw. He'd only said so much to Jackdaw out of respect for Han Sure. The God race diviner smiled at Jackdaw, then turned his gaze to Chun Jianan. Where is it? Before they arrived, Chun Jianan had already told them about Yi Zichen's hiding in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Of course, he didn't say it was the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. All he said was that it was an immortal residence with astonishing defenses. Chun Jianan immediately took a few steps forward and spread out his divine sense, locking onto the Yao Ceiling Pagoda that had turned into dust. Right here, the God race divinity easily locked onto the speck of dust. After carefully examining it, he pointed a finger forward. A bolt of lightning suddenly shot out from his fingertip, blasting a large pit in the ground around him. But the dust was still safe and sound. They didn't expect this to be the result. Chun Jianan and the other supreme beings were stunned. Even Jackdaw looked astonished. At the diviner level, one could easily use the laws of the heavenly Tao, and their attacks would be thousands of times stronger than a Sky Supreme's. Before they arrived, Jackdaw was certain that the Yao Ceiling Pagoda would be broken, but he never expected it was completely intact. Without breaking through the defense of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, the celestial diviner didn't show any signs of uneasiness. On the contrary, he seemed to take it for granted. Suddenly withdrawing his finger, the God race heavenly being said to the demon race heavenly being, Brother White, give a try. The Yao race heavenly being was a short, capable man. He rubbed his nose, took a few steps forward, and punched the dust. The dust remained intact. The demon race heavenly being shook his head and walked to the side. This won't do. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda's defenses really are astonishing. Even with our abilities, we can't break through it. Brother White, you can tell that it's the Yao ceiling pagoda too? The God race diviner raised his eyebrows and smiled. The Yao race diviner nodded. I can see it. The only thing in the world that can allow living things to live inside and turn into dust is the Yao ceiling pagoda. That's right. The God race heavenly being sighed. I came here to confirm whether or not it really is the Yao ceiling pagoda. It seems I'm right. The two diviners ignored Chun Jianan and the others and began chatting among themselves. When the surrounding supremes heard them mention the Yao ceiling pagoda, they stared in astonishment. The Yao ceiling pagoda. Could it be the five elements great emperor's Yao ceiling pagoda? While they were still in shock, the two diviners ended their conversation. The divine race's diviner called Chun Jianan over. We're preparing to go back. You just came down. Are you going back already? Asked Chun Jianan in shock. The higher-ups discussed it with the laws, and the condition for us to come down was that we could only launch one attack here. We've already used one attack, so we can't stay here any longer. Besides, this is the Yao ceiling pagoda. Even if we stay, we won't be able to threaten it in the slightest, said the God race heavenly being. Then, can we ask a ruler to come down? What are you thinking? Do you have so much free time, even as a ruler? Before Chun Jianan could finish his sentence, the God race heavenly being frowned and berated him. Anyone stronger than a diviner is under the strict protection of the laws. Us diviners coming down here is already an act of mercy, yet you want a ruler to come down? Then what should we do now? Chun Jianan knit his brows. He'd already been following Yi Zichen around for 3 years. During that time, he didn't dare cultivate and instead used his divine sense to monitor the situation. He couldn't afford to waste time. That'll depend on how you handle it. The God race heavenly being patted Chun Jianan on the shoulder. This is your great fortune. This divine artifact is the Yao ceiling pagoda. Even the God Emperor values it highly. If you can offer it to the God Emperor, the God race heavenly being hesitated. In the end, he gave Chun Jianan a rather cryptic look, then disappeared from the wilderness with the Yao race heavenly being. It really is the five elements great emperor's Yao ceiling pagoda. Chun Jianan's heart was aflame. Only the five elements great emperor's Yao ceiling pagoda could catch the God Emperor's attention. It was just as the God race heavenly being had said. This was his great fortune. If he could seize this opportunity, but the problem was Yi Zichen wouldn't come out of the pagoda. I have to think of a way to force him out, said Chun Jianan to himself. His eyes darted back and forth, and a vicious glint flashed through them. Guan Yu, Big Brother Jianan. In response, a seventh-stage Sky Supreme stepped out. Chun Jianan narrowed his eyes, walked up to her, and whispered in her ear for a long time. When he left Guan Yu's ear, he saw her frown. Big Brother Jianan, when we came down here, Master repeatedly warned us not to make contact with the people of the lower realms. Not only are you making contact with them, but you're also using them to threaten them. If Master found out, he'd be angry. Chapter 1191. Coercion. Although the female Heavenly Supreme was still a little hesitant, she didn't hesitate any longer and disappeared from the wildlands. The God race's side suddenly made a move. The demon races and devil races supremes were all on guard. Now, not only was the Xin Yuan soar in front of them, but there was also a chance for them to soar through the ranks. Yao ceiling pagoda. Whether it was the God Emperor, Yao Emperor, or Demon Emperor, they all flocked to it. If any of them could deliver the Yao ceiling pagoda to an emperor, their future would change drastically. Brother Jackdaw, should we? At that moment, a transmission appeared in Jackdaw's mind. He instinctively raised his head and saw Enhu giving him a meaningful look. Jackdaw smiled faintly, maintaining his previous posture. He lowered his head as if drawing circles on the ground. At the same time, he transmitted to Enhu. Isn't it a little too early to start forming alliances now? I don't think it's early. Enhu deliberately hid his emotions. He stared at the ground and said, the five elements great emperor's Yao ceiling pagoda is a divine item that can only be found by chance. Tens of thousands of years ago, the five elements great emperor used the Yao ceiling pagoda to beat us pretty badly. We've only recovered a bit after all these years. If Chun Jianan gives the Yao Ceiling Pagoda to the God Emperor now, then our two races. Inhu didn't finish his sentence, but he trusted that Jackdaw would understand. Jackdaw didn't comment. Tens of thousands of years ago, when the Five Elements Great Emperor was still alive, he relied on his Tao Heart of the Five Elements and the Yao Ceiling Pagoda to suppress all races. That was the era when the God race was at its peak. Right now, the God Emperor was the strongest of the three races. If the Yao Ceiling Pagoda was given to him, the Yao and demon races would return to the situation they were in 10,000 years ago. This pagoda could not be given to Chun Jianan. However, Jackdaw was even more curious about who was sealed inside the Yao Ceiling Tower. That was why the Eastern Monarch Tai had begged the Five Elements Great Emperor 3 times in the past, even going so far as to exhaust his origin energy to fight him. Rumor had it that the Yao Emperor didn't want to steal the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Instead, he wanted the Five Elements Great Emperor to release one person. Before we join forces, I have a question to ask you. Jackdaw smiled and nodded. Just who is locked up in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda? Why is the Yao Emperor so friendly with it? I don't know either. The Yao Emperor and the Five Elements Great Emperor are both supreme experts of our world. How could a mere Sky Supreme like me possibly know about the secrets between them? However, I heard that there seems to be an old acquaintance of the Demon Emperor locked up there. Inhu sent a telepathic message to Zhang Xian after revealing what he knew. Are we going to cooperate or not? Give me a message. All right, I'll cooperate with you this once. Jackdaw was a little disappointed that he hadn't been able to resolve his suspicions. However, he still agreed to cooperate. That's great. If we work together, Chun Jianan will definitely not be our match. Inu glanced in Chun Jianan's direction and said, I just don't know what the people he sent are doing. I just used my divine sense to lock on her position, but she disappeared halfway. What could he possibly be doing? He's definitely playing some despicable trick. Jackdaw, Chun Jianan, and Inu were actually representatives of their respective races' younger generation. They were all outstanding talents of the younger generation, so they were naturally familiar with each other. However, Jackdaw had always scoffed at Chun Jianan's character. On the surface, he looked cultured and refined, but behind the scenes, he always played dirty tricks. At the end of the day, he was just a sanctimonious person. For example, Chun Jianan had snuck up on the God race's diviner. If Inhu and Jackdaw hadn't noticed, the Yao diviner wouldn't have come down. Even so, we still have to be on guard, said Inhu. What's there to be on guard for? Can't we just ask? Jackdaw's eyes flashed. He tossed the rock he was fiddling with into the distance and walked over to Chun Jianan. Brother Chun, it seems the Yao and demons have reached some sort of agreement. On the God race's side, the Supreme who'd come down with Chun Jianan walked over to his side. He glanced at the Yao and demons, then frowned and transmitted. When he heard this, Chun Jianan merely smiled calmly. His fingers gently stuck to the gravel on the ground, and he snorted carelessly. Don't worry about them. Even if they join forces, they won't be able to do anything. In the face of absolute strength, no tricks will work. Brother Chun, while Chun Jianan and the God Ray Supreme were talking, Jackdaw walked up to them. Just a second ago, Chun Jianan's eyes were as dark as still water. The moment he raised his head, he beamed. Brother Jackdaw, I didn't think we'd run into the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. However, it's no wonder it was the Five Elements Great Emperor's proudest divine artifact. Not even a diviner could shake it. That's only natural. If even a diviner could break through the Five Elements Great Emperor's divine artifact, then it wouldn't be ranked number 1 on the divine artifact rankings, laughed Chun Jianan. You're right, Brother Chun. Jackdaw smiled non-committally. The surrounding Yao, God, and Demon Supremes all looked at Chun Jianan and Jackdaw. The agreement they'd reached for the Xianyuan sword had become extremely complicated after the appearance of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Now that Jackdaw had taken the initiative to chat with Chun Jianan, their nerves were stretched taut. Hey, I saw Brother Chun send out a supreme martial artist just now. I wonder what she did? After a brief pause, Jackdaw asked the question straightforwardly. Chun Jianan arched his brows. When he saw Jackdaw smile, He laughed as well. There's no need to hide it. I sent people out precisely because I thought of a way to force Yi Zichen out. Wasting time with him isn't a long-term solution. With that, the supreme he'd sent returned to the wastelands. As soon as she landed, she sensed the subtle change in the atmosphere. You're back. When Chun Jianan saw her, he didn't bother chatting with Jackdaw. He simply walked over and said, "Did you bring them?" He waved his hand, and a dozen or so men and women appeared before them. Xueqi, Stone, Xuelon, and the others were among them. Brother Jianan, these are all members of Yi Zichen's faction before he ascended. A few of them are on pretty good terms with him. Not bad. Chun Jianan chuckled. The members of the leisure house, who'd been tied up and unable to speak, were all astonished when they heard Yi Zichen's name. When Chun Jianan took in their expressions, his eyes flashed with cold light. The divine sword he carried with him appeared in his hand, and he brought it to a member's neck. Chapter 1192. Within the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Within the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, Yi Zichen was still immersed in cultivation. He'd been in seclusion for 3 years now. During that time, he hadn't taken even half a step out of his secret room. He'd been in deep meditation the entire time. This was the longest seclusion he'd ever spent in his life. Within his spiritual sea, Yi Zichen's soul clone sat cross-legged in the void. As it breathed in and out the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, 5 imprints representing the 5 elements floated in front of it. Fire. The little person with his eyes closed pointed forward, and the fire attribute imprint of the 5 imprints floated in front of him. With a wave of his finger, the void instantly transformed into a sea of flames. The flames burned so fiercely that they seemed capable of melting the heavens and earth. Before long, the sea of flames turned a crystalline blue. At the same time, the temperature of the land of nothingness dropped to 0 due to the burning of the flames. Ice and fire complete. Suddenly, Yi Zichen opened his eyes. After countless simulations, I've only managed to change the fire attribute of the 5 elements a little. If I want to complete the Tao of the 5 elements and condense a Tao heart, who knows how long it'll take. Yi Zichen muttered to himself as he sat in his secret room. He raised his hand, and a crystalline flame appeared in his palm. I never would have guessed that fire's subsequent evolution would no longer be the heat that burns the heavens and earth, but the coldness that freezes mountains and rivers. I'm afraid the pinnacle of fire is ice. Yi Zichen focused his mind and discovered that during his 3 years of seclusion, not only had his fire attribute improved, but his cultivation had also reached the 7th-stage Earth Supreme level. Given his current strength, he could already open the 2nd floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Didn't you want to waste time? Wait until I open the 2nd floor, then we can have some fun. When he thought of Chun Jianan's face, Yi Zichen was infuriated. Suppressing others with his power? Coincidentally, he liked it too. He waved his right hand, and a curtain appeared in his secret room, allowing him to see what was happening outside. However, when he saw what was beyond the curtain, his eyes instantly reddened. Outside the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, several members of the leisure house had already died. Judging by the blood on Chun Jianan's sword, he'd most likely killed them himself. His sword was now pressed to Xueqi's neck. TSK. Your Emperor Yi, who you worship as a celestial being, really likes to be a coward. Chun Jianan looked mockingly at Xueqi and the others. His sword had already cut down more than 10 souls. The surrounding god race, demon race, and demon race sky supremes all looked on coldly. In their eyes, Xueqi and the others weren't even living beings. They were nothing more than ants. However, if it were them, they would definitely not do that. For a mighty sky supreme to slaughter celestial immortals and immortal kings was truly beneath his status. Xueqi glared at Chun Jianan with rage in his eyes. There was no fear, only a raging fire burning in his chest. It was just that he couldn't speak or move right now. Otherwise, even if he had to spill blood, he would use his own blood to stain Chun Jianan's body and leave a mark. Yi Zichen, are you coming out or not? Chun Jianan calmly looked at the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. I heard that you're the savior of this world. Now that the world needs you again, shouldn't you, the savior, come out and show yourself? If you don't answer, I'm going to keep attacking. Chen Jianan smiled playfully at the Yao ceiling pagoda. Suddenly, a furious roar boomed through the wastelands like thunder. Stop! Shueqi's sword stopped in its tracks. When the survivors heard this roar, their faces lit up with delight. Chen Jianan turned to face the Yao ceiling pagoda. You've finally spoken. It seems the world's savior still has some conscience. Of course I do, but I'm afraid a dog ate your conscience. Yi Zichen's transmission reverberated throughout the wastelands. You're a mighty sky supreme, yet you're lowering yourself to fight celestial immortals and immortal kings. Don't you feel ashamed? What's there to feel ashamed about? They can only blame themselves for being weak. Isn't it only natural that the weak get killed? Snorted Chen Jianan. Within the secret room, Yi Zichen was trembling from head to toe. He clenched his fists so hard his knuckles cracked, then transmitted outside. You just want me to leave, right? Fine, I'll leave right now, but you'd best not attack anyone else. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. I await your arrival, said Chen Jianan. Bang! Yi Zichen's fist slammed into the secret room's wall. Everyone on the first floor of the Yao ceiling pagoda felt it. Yi Zichen's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the headless corpse of his old friend, then pushed the door open. He saw Meng Huairong standing outside, looking at him with an anxious expression on her face. All right, I got it. Yi Zichen turned back indifferently, then headed straight for the entrance to the second floor. The entrance to the second floor wasn't blocked by a door like the first. It was a small mountain that completely sealed off the entrance. There was a stone slab in the center of the mountain. Yi Zichen lifted his hand and placed it on top. All of a sudden, the 5 elemental markings on the slate lit up. When he tried to open the second floor, he'd been stuck here. Lighting up the slab meant that he'd comprehended enough of the Tao of the 5 elements. However, after that, he'd have to use his own strength to break through the mountain. He clenched his right hand into a fist, which crackled with lightning. Yi Zichen gathered his energy in his dantian, took a horse stance, and punched the small mountain. Crack! The small mountain blocking the entrance to the second floor of the Yao ceiling pagoda instantly cracked where Yi Zichen's fist landed. The cracks spread outwards until finally it shattered into countless pieces of rock. As soon as the rocks touched the ground, they disappeared. The master opened the entrance to the second floor. Meng Huairong looked at Jiao Qi dejectedly and pursed her lips. I really don't know whether to congratulate the master or feel sorry for us. We should congratulate the master, Jiao Qi said with a meticulous expression. You should be able to sense it. Our cultivation speed is too inferior to the young master's. Although the young master has yet to reach the heavenly sovereign realm, it's just a matter of time before he leaves us in the dust. If we want the master to use us, the only way is to focus on cultivation. I trust the master won't forget about us. That's true, laughed Meng Huairong. As Meng Huairong and Jiao Qi conversed, Yi Zichen retracted his fist, reached out, and pushed the door behind the artificial mountain. There was no resistance at all. When he pushed the door open, he was greeted by an otherworldly scene. However, to Yi Zichen's shock, the instant he pushed open the door, he saw tens of thousands of Yao prostrating themselves on the ground. Then, as soon as he entered the second floor, they all shouted in unison, "Come." Chapter 1193. You're really despicable. How despicable? In order to force Yi Zichen out of the Yao ceiling pagoda, he'd lowered himself to threaten him with his friends and family. Even the demons despised such methods. In order to force Yi Zichen out of the Yao ceiling pagoda, they'd lowered themselves to threaten him with their friends and family. Even demons despised such methods. The people of the demon race were indeed vicious and merciless people. They were bloodthirsty and warlike, and revered plundering and invasion. They weren't like the gods. They were a bunch of sanctimonious people. Even so, Chen Jianan's actions had refreshed their understanding of the gods. In particular, Chen Jianan's actions had refreshed the Yao and demon race's understanding of the god race. Chen Jianan didn't care about Jackdaw's mockery. That's despicable. If Yi Zichen hadn't holed up in there for 3 years, I wouldn't have resorted to this. Besides, our ultimate goal is to force him out. As for what methods we used, what's the point? Even at a time like this, you can still speak so confidently. I truly admire you, as well as the entire god race. Jackdaw cupped his hands at Chun Jianan with a hidden meaning. When the surrounding Supremes heard this, they blushed a little. Chun Jianan's methods were simply too despicable. Chun Jianan acted as if he hadn't heard it all. He calmly watched the Yao ceiling pagoda transform into a speck of dust. Time slowly passed. Half an hour had passed since Yi Zichen's transmission. After such a long wait, a sinister light flashed through Chun Jianan's eyes. If you're trying to buy time like this, I advise you to give up on that idea. His divine sword once more fell to Xue Qi's neck. If you want to live, hurry up and get Yi Zichen out of the Yao ceiling pagoda. You've probably seen what happened to the others. By unlocking Xue Qi's mute acupoint, Chun Jianan wanted to use this method to force Yi Zichen out of the Yao ceiling pagoda as soon as possible. Little did he know, Brother Yi, don't worry about us. Xue Qi roared at the Yao ceiling pagoda. Although he didn't know how strong their captors were, if they could force Yi Zichen to cower in the Yao ceiling pagoda, they had to be someone he couldn't fight. Xue Qi didn't want to harm Yi Zichen because of him. Of course, besides him, Stone, Xuelon, and the others hadn't made their stand clear, but he believed that they definitely had the same thoughts as him. If not, then let them blame themselves. You're courting death. Chun Jianan hadn't expected Xue Qi to say such a thing. His face turned ashen, and he swung his sword at Xue Qi's head. Rumble. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning descended from the heavens and landed squarely on Xue Qi's sword, causing it to deviate slightly and cutting off a strand of Xue Qi's hair. I warned you, if you dare to make a move against anyone, you'll have to bear the consequences. A deep, angry roar exploded in everyone's ears. For a moment, the sky turned dark and the earth turned dark. Everyone saw that the sky was closed down by the sea of thunder. Thunder rumbled continuously in the sea of thunder. Countless bolts of heavenly thunder devoured each other and turned into roaring divine dragons that soared above the 9 heavens. Yi Zichen stood alone, surrounded by the Yao, Demon, and God Ray Supremes. His pitch-black eyes flickered with lightning, and lightning crackled endlessly from them. Snakes of lightning snaked around him, resonating with the sea of lightning. They didn't know why, but the surrounding Supremes felt a faint sense of pressure from Yi Zichen. Before, they might have been able to rely on their cultivation to fight Yi Zichen's arts of the 5 elements, but now they had less than a 10% chance of winning against any one of them. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. It had only been 3 years. In 3 short years, he'd undergone such a qualitative transformation. If he had enough time, who knew how far he'd go? Some of the Supremes rejoiced that Chun Jianan had forced Yi Zichen out of hiding. If they'd allowed him to do as he pleased, they might have all died along with him. The surrounding Supremes all had different thoughts. Chun Jianan, Jackdaw, and Yin were no exception. The Yi Zichen before them was completely different from the Yi Zichen they'd first seen. That sea of lightning, in particular, had shaken Chun Jianan to no end. It was almost a tenth the size of their clan's lightning pool. Could it be that in the past 3 years, Yi Zichen's comprehension of lightning had broken through yet again? Ugh! Just as Chun Jianan recovered from his shock, the sea of lightning blazed with raging flames once more. The sea of fire and the sea of lightning merged with each other. Gradually, those lightning dragons that soared in the sky began to burn with icy blue flames. Lightning and fire fused together. This time, it wasn't just Chun Jianan. Even Jackdaw was astonished. Fusing different elements was extremely difficult. Just how monstrous was Yi Zichen's talent? He'd reached this level in just 3 years. Furthermore, that fire was clearly ice fire. That was a mutation that could only occur if one's comprehension of fire reached an extremely high level. Gradually, Yi Zichen's black robes changed. They were no longer pure black. Instead, a roaring lightning dragon appeared, its eyes wide open. It was a majestic aura. Lightning gathered above his head, forming a crown. Instantly, The aura of a king filled the wastelands. They couldn't let Yi Zichen's arrogance continue to grow. You've improved quite a bit in the past 3 years. After a brief moment of shock, Chun Jianan broke the deathly silence. If they let Yi Zichen continue, their morale would be severely affected. Isn't this all thanks to you? Yi Zichen seemed to have transformed into a god of lightning. His every word was like heavenly thunder, booming in the ears of the surrounding Supremes. The surrounding Supremes' hearts trembled with fear. They looked at Yi Zichen as fearfully and uneasily as if he were their emperor. Then, they heard him speak again. Back then, you said you wanted to play out with me. Now, you're using my friend to threaten me into leaving the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Fine, I'm standing right in front of you now. What do you have to say? His confident tone and gaze shocked Chun Jianan and the others. However, as Sky Supremes, their Tao hearts weren't so easily destroyed. Do you really think you're invincible just because you broke through? I can't be bothered to waste my breath on you. Hand over the Xinyuan sword and Yao Ceiling Pagoda, and I'll leave your corpse intact. Chapter 1194. Battle Chun Jianan. Chapter 1194. Battle Chun Jianan. Yi Zichen's domineering aura was displayed to its fullest extent. When he reached out with his right hand, he held his left hand behind his back. His calm gaze was filled with undisguised contempt. Then I won't hold back. As soon as Yi Zichen said that, Chun Jianan's figure flashed. In the blink of an eye, he'd advanced 100 meters. Yi Zichen held the Yao Ceiling Pagoda in his hand, but he didn't budge. Instead, he kept his right hand outstretched, waiting for Chun Jianan to arrive. However, just as Chun Jianan was about 10 meters away from Yi Zichen, the Thunderflame Dragon roared through the air. Oomph! Chun Jianan instantly tossed his divine sword into the air. Lightning flickered within the divine sword, forming an impenetrable net above his head. The moment Lei Fire Dragon entered the net, the lightning net contracted and trapped Lei Fire Dragon within. After capturing the Thunder Flame Dragon, Chun Jianan sneered disdainfully. So what if his aura was boundless? In the face of absolute strength, a paper tiger was nothing but a paper tiger. Is that all you've got? Little did he know, the trapped Thunder Flame Dragon was still roaring within the net. As it struggled, a wave of frigid air emanated from its body. Icy blue flames clung to the lightning net and burned fiercely. In the blink of an eye, the net made of lightning completely froze the icy blue flames. Then it melted. Roar! The Thunder Dragon broke free of the net, opened its mouth wide, and tried to swallow Chun Jianan whole. This scene caused Chun Jianan to furrow his brows. However, the clumsy Lei Yin dragon did not succeed, even though he had forewarned it. The dragon's breath landed on his body, causing a thin layer of ice to form on his clothes. Chun Jianan's divine sword then cut it in half. Nice! The surrounding Supremes couldn't help but cheer. Just now, they'd been worried for Chun Jianan. Is that all you've got? Chun Jianan swung his sword, then regained his former arrogance. His eyes were filled with playfulness and disdain. Is there a need to get so excited just because you killed one? Yi Zichen smiled calmly, then arched his brows at the sky. The Thunder Flame Dragons that were swimming in the Thunder Flame sea turned into ferocious beasts that roared at Chun Jianan with boundless might. Chun Jianan's expression turned grave as he watched the Thunder Fire Dragon descend from the heavens. His finger brushed the edge of the sword, causing a drop of blood to drip from his cut finger. The blood flowed along the edge of the sword and onto the hilt. After Chun Jianan swallowed the essence blood, a strange light flashed across the sword hilt. Then, he turned into a beam of light that shot through the sky. So fast. Within the wasteland, the Supremes could only see a white meteor-like beam of light shuttling around the Thunder Flame Dragon. The Lightning Flame Dragons either spat out icy flames or lightning explosions. For a time, the entire sky was devoid of light, and it was extremely dazzling. Not long after, the Thunder Flame Dragon in the sky finally caught Chun Jianan's trail. A bolt of lightning struck him, causing him to fall heavily from the sky to the ground. Profound Thunderstorm Sword. The moment Chun Jianan landed on the ground, everyone heard him shout. Suddenly, more than a dozen magic arrays appeared in the sky. These magic arrays sealed off all the thunder fire dragons in the sky. Countless lightning swords rained down from the magic arrays and bombarded the thunder fire dragons. I didn't know he had this trick up his sleeve. As he watched the rain of lightning fall from the sky, Inhu's gaze grew solemn. They'd never heard of this profound technique, nor had they ever seen Chun Jianan use it. Judging from the power of the sword rain, even Inhu would be heavily injured if he was caught off guard. As the sword rain passed, the thunder flame dragon scattered. After crashing to the ground, Chun Jianan gasped for breath as he crawled to his feet. The thunderstorm sword had always been his trump card. He'd use it to catch Jackdaw and Inhu off guard when they fought. However, there was nothing he could do now. If there were only one or two Thunderflame dragons, he'd have an easier time dealing with them. That was a total of 30 Thunderfire dragons. Even without the Thunderclap Sword Storm, he would have been severely injured by that group of Thunderfire dragons. Back then, although he'd used this trump card, the Thunderflame dragons in the Sea of Lightning had all scattered. These Thunderflame dragons were most likely Yi Zichen's trump card. Once he dealt with them, he wouldn't be able to cause any more trouble. As for Jackdaw and Inhu, he had plenty of other methods to deal with them. He touched his cheek. Just now, the Thunderflame dragon's thunderstorm had landed on the left side of his face. A wisp of red appeared on his finger, and the viciousness in his eyes intensified. Is that all you've got? Even Yi Zichen had to admit that Chun Jianan had some skill. He was well aware of the Lei Fire Dragon's power. After fusing with the ice and fire, the Lei Fire Dragon's fighting strength wasn't any weaker than a heavenly sovereign. Chun Jianan had used a single profound technique to wipe out 30 Thunderflame dragons. He was very strong. Not bad. Yi Zichen nodded at Chun Jianan and smiled confidently. Your Thunderstorm profound technique is more than enough to prove your status among Sky Supremes. Yi Zichen's tone was that of a senior appreciating a junior. Chun Jianan's gaze darkened even more. He narrowed his eyes and laughed, then said the same thing. Your Thunderflame dragons are more than enough to prove your status among Earth Supremes. An Earth Supreme against a 9th stage Sky Supreme. You're also a monster. When they heard their conversation, the surrounding Sky Supremes' hearts trembled. If Chun Jianan hadn't mentioned it, they might have forgotten that Yi Zichen was just an Earth Supreme. The difference between Earth and Sky Supremes was like a chasm, yet Yi Zichen had single-handedly forced Chun Jianan, a 9th stage Sky Supreme, to unleash his profound technique. The difference between Earth and Sky Supremes was like a chasm, yet Yi Zichen had single-handedly forced Chun Jianan, a 9th stage Sky Supreme, to unleash his profound technique. All right. Now be a good boy and hand over the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Chun Jianan took a pill and slowly approached Yi Zichen. Didn't I say the Yao Ceiling Pagoda was right here? Come and take it. Yi Zichen's expression was as calm as ever as he hefted the pagoda. His confident smile caused the surrounding Sky Supremes to frown despite themselves. Could it be that he still had more trump cards up his sleeve? It was said that the Tao of the 5 elements complemented each other. He just unleashed lightning and fire. Could it be that he gained new insights into wind, rain, and lightning as well? That was what the other Supremes thought, but Chun Jianan didn't believe it. In just 3 years, Yi Zichen had broken through in the 5 elements. Fusing fire and lightning was already difficult enough. He refused to believe that Yi Zichen had broken through in the other elements as well. Don't try to intimidate me. If you can fuse the other elements, I'll leave the Yao Ceiling Pagoda to you. I'll take my people and leave right now, snorted Chun Jianan disdainfully. Come and take it. You're just playing tricks. Chun Jianan didn't believe it. He charged forward without hesitation, but before he'd even taken a few steps, he sensed dozens of terrifying auras appear in the wilderness. At the same time, Yi Zichen smiled calmly. Chapter 1195. Kill them all. Suddenly, the sky darkened. The pool of lightning in the sky faded, and the icy blue flames dissipated. What appeared in the wilderness was an army of demons that covered the sky and covered the earth, flying through the air. The instant they appeared, the wildland sky supremes sensed at least a dozen similar or even stronger auras lock onto them. Jackdaw, Inhu, and Chunjianan, the strongest of the three major powers, were the ones who received the most attention. All the Sky Supremes tensed up, including Jackdaw, who'd been indolent from start to finish. When the Yao Ninth and 8th Stage Sky Supremes locked onto him, his expression turned grave. Inhu. In practically an instant, Chun Jianan turned and roared at Inhu. The other demon and god race experts did the same. Their faces were ashen as they stared at the Yao. Shockingly, the Yao's aura had locked onto them. The three factions often clashed with each other. So how could they not sense the Yao experts in the sky? Their numbers blotted out the sky. There were at least 100 of them. Moreover, even the weakest of them was a 7th Stage Sky Supreme. You Yao really are trustworthy, roared Chun Jianan. Before they arrived, the top experts of the three factions had reached an agreement. Each faction could send no more than 15 Sky Supremes, and only one 9th Stage Sky Supreme. The rest of the experts would be sent from their P clans. But now, the Yao in the sky were clearly telling them that the Yao had broken their agreement. Those aren't our people, explained Inhu frantically. Then could they be our people? Roared Chun Jianan. By now, he was genuinely afraid. Most Yao who could break through to the Sky Supreme level were divine beasts. Divine beasts were blessed with innate physical advantages. Although gods who'd undergone divine tribulation could contend with divine beasts, not just anyone could undergo divine tribulation. Take Xinjianan, for example. Even though he was a monstrous son of heaven and his fame had spread far and wide, he'd yet to truly transcend the god realm and condense his godhead. Earlier, he'd expended a great deal of energy dealing with Yi Zichen's Tao of lightning and fire. Now that he was up against a 9th Stage Sky Supreme and several 8th Stage Demon Race experts, he had no chance of winning. Inhu, your Demon Race has won this time. We will withdraw from the fight for the Xianyuan Sword and the Yao Sealing Pagoda. Now, have your people back off and let us go. As for your betrayal, I'll report it to God Emperor Bing and Thunder Monarch when I get back. This wasn't the time to be a hero. Chun Jianan was more concerned about the lives of these people. It really wasn't me. Inhu didn't know how to explain himself. Inhu. Chun Jianan's eyes were bloodshot. He gripped his divine sword tightly in his hand. Do you want to kill us all here? Do you dare? Chun Jianan wouldn't let go of Inhu. Meanwhile, on the demon's side, Jackdaw watched the Yao in the sky with a grave expression. He took in Inhu's expression in every little move he made. Jackdaw's gaze flickered back and forth between Inhu and the Yao. Something's not right. They shouldn't be Inhu's people. Chun Jianan, you've misunderstood him. That's right, they weren't our people to begin with. When he heard that Jackdaw was actually speaking up for him, Inhu furrowed his brows. They've already locked onto our people. What's more, the Emperor and the rules discussed this beforehand. How could we have sent so many people without your knowledge? Then who could it be? Chun Jianan narrowed his eyes. I know what sort of agreement you two came to. Do you think I'd believe you if you spoke up for him? Don't forget, we have the Yao Sealing Pagoda. In response to Chun Jianan's suspicions, Jackdaw smirked coldly, then glanced at the smiling Yi Zichen. It was also at this moment that the other supreme beings turned their gazes over. So, you didn't start fighting? What a shame. I thought you'd fight amongst yourselves. Yi Zichen pulled out a chair from somewhere and sat down. He leisurely crossed his legs and sipped his wine. Two beautiful 8th Stage Sky Supreme women stood by his side, waiting on him. When he sensed their auras, Chun Jianan's pupils constricted. Blue veins bulged on his forehead as he pointed at Yi Zichen and roared, "It's you! It's you!" The instant he pointed at Yi Zichen, the two women's gazes turned cold, and they melted into the darkness. Inexplicably, Chun Jianan felt a wave of frigid energy seep into his body from the soles of his feet. His body froze for half a second because of the chill, and it was also in this half a second that a cold light flashed in front of him. When everyone came back to their senses, they saw that the finger he had extended had already left his hand and landed on the ground. Even more frightening, Chun Jiannan didn't feel any pain at all. His blood was sealed in a layer of ice. It wasn't until the two women returned to Yi Zichen's side that he felt a heart-wrenching pain. I'm truly sorry. I didn't restrain my subordinates well enough, and they broke your finger. It must hurt, right? Yi Zichen cocked his head and smiled calmly. Shadow charms. One of the Yao recognized the two women's true forms. His eyes trembled. Didn't they say shadow charms went extinct during the Great War of Gods and Demons? Why do they still exist? In truth, shadow charms weren't Yao, but they were classified as such. Any adult shadow charm was a qualified assassin. During the Great War of Gods and Demons, a half-step ruler ancestor of the shadow charms used their race's concealment and assassination techniques to kill multiple demon rulers without fail. The demon emperor was enraged and personally exterminated the shadow charms. Since then, the demon clan had never seen the existence of Ingmei again. Quite a few demon experts widened their eyes in shock. Although they hadn't experienced the shadow charms assassination, they'd left a mark on their history. Yi Zichen, Chun Jiannan, who'd lost a finger, roared madly. He sealed his fingers' acupoints, but his gaze was inexplicably playful. With the Yao of the Yao Sealing Pagoda around, I really can't do anything to you. But so what? Do you dare touch a single one of us? The Sky Supremes here are the elites of the three realms' major factions. If you kill us, you'll offend the entire three realms. In the future, you'll have to bear the wrath of every major faction in the three realms. You'll never be able to rest in peace. You're just bluffing. If I really let you kill us, would you dare? Did you know? That's what your junior apprentice brother, Xiao Hu, said back then. Yi Zichen's smile suddenly faded, and he roared at the Yao in the sky. Chapter 1196. Are you angry? Don't you dare. Chun Jiannan pressed his divine sword to Xueqi's neck. His expression was dark and sinister. Tell your people to stand down, or they'll all die. The surrounding Supremes' eyes shone with faint hope. They no longer felt that Chun Jiannan's methods were despicable. On the contrary, they rejoiced that they still had bargaining chips. However, to their despair, Yi Zichen merely glanced at them, then turned to the Yao in the Yao Sealing Pagoda and gestured. Kill them. Do you want them to die? Chun Jiannan's eyes were bloodshot, but he didn't dare attack Xueqi or the others. This was their final bargaining chip. If he really killed them, then they... At that moment, Xueqi, Stone, and Xuelon stepped out from behind Yi Zichen. When he saw this, Chun Jiannan's eyes filled with terror. He swung his sword viciously, but his opponent was nothing more than a pile of dirt. Are you in despair? Yi Zichen laughed like a demon. He looked at Chun Jiannan with ridicule. Despite his panic, Chun Jiannan refused to believe his luck and looked at the others. They were all just pieces of wood. No one knew when Yi Zichen had swapped Xueqi and the others, but all the Supremes knew that they'd lost all bargaining chips. Master, save me. Suddenly, Chun Jiannan's divine sword split in two. A wisp of a soul emerged from the divine sword. The Deva soul that came out of the blade began to devour the surrounding natural energy, which made the natural energy in the entire three lower realms much thinner. Once the soul devoured the energy, it gradually condensed into a human figure. It was none other than Xiao Hu of the God Race's Lightning Emperor. The surrounding Supremes froze. When Jackdaw and Enhu saw this, their expressions flickered. They glared at Chun Jiannan and the gods, fury in their eyes. To think that the gods would go so far as to seal a strand of Xiao Hu's diviner soul inside the Xinyuan sword. If Chun Jiannan had suddenly summoned Xiao Hu while they were fighting, the Yao and demons would have been completely annihilated. Don't underestimate this strand of soul. Even if it was only a tenth of Xiao Hu's strength, it was still enough to destroy the heavens and earth. Xiao Hu. Yi Zichen raised his eyebrows when he saw Xiao Hu emerge from the sword, then turned to the two flirtatious women beside him. He's the Deva aura you were talking about. Yes. The two women nodded at the same time. For the sake of obtaining the Xinyuan sword, they really spared no effort. Yi Zichen snorted darkly, but the seriousness in his eyes only grew more obvious. Kid, We really are fated to meet again in such a short time. Xiao Hu was wearing an orange-yellow robe, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. The moment he appeared, the demons in the Yao ceiling pagoda stopped as well. They could feel the strength of this person's aura. It was so strong that they could not fight against him. Everyone, enter the tower. With Xiao Hu present, Yi Zichen knew full well that the Yao in the Yao ceiling pagoda were no match for him. In order to avoid casualties, Yi Zichen immediately recalled them back into the pagoda. As for facing Xiao Hu, he wasn't afraid at all. At most, he would just hide in the Yao ceiling pagoda. Once he cultivated for a few hundred years, he'd come out and smash Xiao Hu into a meat patty. Xiao Hu watched the Yao disappear one by one, but ignored them. He simply smiled calmly at Yi Zichen. I never would have guessed the Yao ceiling pagoda was in your hands. If I'd known, I would have captured you even if it meant falling out with the sea of innocence. For better or for worse, you're a diviner. Why are you always acting like you have nothing better to do? You were Xiao Zhan's nanny for a while, and now you're Chun Jiannan's nanny. Aren't you tired? Mocked Yi Zichen. You're still as sharp-tongued as ever, but last time, the sea of innocence saved you. This time, Xiao Hu's aura surged. In his fury, the surrounding mountains crumbled, the earth cracked, and the rivers flowed in reverse. Yi Zichen instinctively gulped. He was already prepared to dive back into the Yao ceiling pagoda. This time I saved him. Aren't you angry? Inexplicably, bell-like laughter rang out from the wastelands. Everyone looked into the distance and saw a phoenix carriage flying over from the horizon. The phoenix carriage was pulled by 8 spectral horses, and the horses' footprints left clusters of dark blue flames in the air. In the blink of an eye, the carriage arrived in front of them. Aya, I'm so tired from all the traveling. The phoenix carriage's curtains were pulled open, and a woman stepped out. She was yawning and exhausted. Chimei, Yi Zichen, who was just about to enter the Yao ceiling pagoda, stopped. The woman giggled, ran up to him, and hugged his arm. Sweetie, you're not hurt, are you? Aya, it's been so long since I last saw you. You've gotten thinner. At the same time, Inhu and the other Yao knelt to the ground. My lord, at ease. Chimei waved at Inhu and the others, then blinked her large, bright eyes and smiled with dimples. Sweetie, I've missed you so much. You? Who exactly are you? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. Just now, he'd clearly heard Inhu and the others call her lord. This was no ordinary superior-subordinate relationship. It was more like the relationship between master and servant. I'll tell you later. Right now, I have to deal with this reckless bastard. Chimei let go of Yi Zichen's arm and stepped forward. Xiao Hu, who just threatened to kill Yi Zichen, looked as if he'd been nailed to the ground. Are you angry? Chimei cocked her head to the side and smiled. Of all the people you could have provoked, you had to provoke my sweetie. The god race and devil race's supremes stared blankly at the scene unfolding before them. They were shocked that Xiao Hu, a half-step sovereign realm expert, couldn't even move in front of Chimei. Even if this was just a wisp of his soul, he was still a peak diviner expert. You know what? I hate your Xiao family the most. Yet you dared provoke my sweetie? Then, leave this wisp of your soul behind. As soon as he finished speaking, a hunchbacked old man with grizzled hair suddenly appeared in everyone's line of sight. They couldn't sense any fluctuations of divine power from him. He looked just like an ordinary old man. But that was precisely what terrified them the most. For someone to appear so stealthily in front of them, there was no way he was an ordinary person. But any expert, no matter how well they hid themselves, would always reveal their aura. If this old man could conceal himself so well, there was only one possibility. Chapter 1197. Time came to a standstill. Chapter 1197. Time stands still as Chimei nodded at the old man. The hunchbacked old man walked straight to Xiao Hu. The old man's palm flickered with a rainbow-colored light, and the surrounding space became distorted and chaotic under the light. At the same time, a thin thread emerged from Xiao Hu's body and burrowed into the old man's palm. As time passed, Xiao Hu's body gradually grew indistinct. The surrounding sky supremes stood to the side in a daze, their hearts filled with indescribable terror. However, Inhu and the other Yao looked relaxed. They knew who this newcomer was and wouldn't attack them. Who exactly is Chi Mei? Chi Mei's identity had been a mystery ever since she'd first appeared. At first, Yi Zichen suspected she was a descendant of the Five Elements' great emperor, but now the Yao called her lord. Then there was the old man by her side, who'd suppress Xiao Hu with a snap of his fingers. With such a powerful protector by her side, why had she bothered with him for so long over a condensing pill? She'd deliberately gotten close to him. What exactly did she want? For the Yao Sealing Pagoda? Or for the Xianyuan sword? The way he saw it, he and Chi Mei were from two completely different worlds. There was absolutely nothing about him that was worthy of a young lady like Chi Mei's attention. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the sky. A crack appeared in the sky, and golden lightning mixed with rolling thunder drilled out of the crack. In an instant, whether it was the immortal region, the heavenly court, the underworld, the endless beast region, or the wildlands, they all felt a suffocating pressure bearing down on them. All races were shaken. Countless supreme experts in the area emerged from seclusion and looked at the crack in the sky. It was also at this moment that they realized how insignificant they, who had once been looked up to by all the saints in this domain, were now. They resisted the trembling in their hearts and raised their heads, wanting to see what was inside the crack. However, at that moment, time, stand still. A golden pendulum clock suddenly appeared in the sky. Its pendulum let out a low, clear cry, then stopped swinging. The wind stopped blowing and the water stilled. It was as if the entire world had frozen over. The experts of the heavenly court, underworld, and immortal region were all frozen in their positions, looking up at the sky, sealed in place. Xiao family, you've gone too far. After freezing everything in the world, a child riding a green ox walked out of the wilderness. We agreed to send a heavenly supreme here, which was a huge concession. Even if you left a strand of a Davis soul in your weapon, we would have let you off the hook. But now you want to come here with your true form. This has nothing to do with you. Scram! A deep roar resounded from the crack, and in the blink of an eye, a pair of giant hands appeared from the crack, tearing the sky apart. Not long after, a brawny man with lightning flashing all over his body walked out of the crack. This brawny man was Xiao Hu's main body. As he stepped into the wildlands, the space around him seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure, and cracks began to appear in the space around him. Don't go too far, the child riding the green ox rebuked. I said, don't meddle in other people's business, or I'll kill you too. Rumble. A bolt of purplish-red divine lightning crashed down on the child. Before it could strike, a colorless barrier appeared around the child, protecting him. However, the residual power of the lightning destroyed more than half of the wildlands. Scram! His eyes narrowed and his voice rumbled. Xiao Hu was like a god descending to the mortal world. He stood proudly in the sky and shouted at the child mercilessly. You! The child glared at Xiao Hu in the sky, then silently retreated to the side. However, at that moment, Chi Mei appeared beside the child at some point. She reached out and tousled his hair, a smile in her eyes. Little brother, don't be afraid. Big sister is here. With that, she turned to the old man and spoke softly. Uncle Lu, you want my Davis soul? I like to see if you have what it takes. Suddenly, a 10,000-meter tall shadow appeared behind Xiao Hu. It was a deity holding a thunder god hammer with lightning flashing in its eyes. As Xiao Hu waved his arm, the deity behind him followed suit. His arm carried a force that seemed capable of collapsing mountains and rivers as it ruthlessly smashed down on the old man. Noisy, the old man didn't even bat an eyelid. He waved his right hand, and to everyone's astonishment, Xiao Hu disappeared from space. Subsequently, the collapsed mountains returned to their original state. The half-destroyed wildlands was also restored to its original state. The broken sky was completely healed. It was as if nothing had happened. At the same time, Xiao Hu's Davis soul condensed into a palm-sized soul core in the old man's hand. Why'd you let him go? Chi Mei asked when she saw this. The old man put away the soul core and handed it over to her. The space here is too weak. If I were to unleash my powers here, I'm afraid the entire world would collapse. I sent him to the outside. Once you're done here, it won't be too late for me to deal with him. All right, but the masters of the laws really are getting worse with each generation. She shook her head at the cowherd boy and sighed. Then she snapped her fingers at the golden clock. The pendulum clock disappeared from the sky, and the cowherd boy on the back of his azure ox vanished from the wastelands as well. Where did it go? The immortal kings of the three lower realms looked up at the sky in astonishment. It wasn't just them. The sky supremes of the wastelands looked up at the sky in bewilderment. Just now, they'd clearly sensed a transcendent aura descend upon this world. I can't help but feel like I missed something. Yi Zichen knit his brows. Although he'd caused the pendulum clock to appear and stop time, he had the feeling that something had happened in between. He looked around, but nothing had changed. The Sky Supremes, Chi Mei, and the old man were still standing where they'd been. Wait, why had Xiaohu disappeared? Xiaohu's body clearly hadn't completely disappeared just now. Sweetie, what are you thinking about? As Yi Zichen pondered what had happened, Chi Mei walked up to him, her hands clasped behind her back. She batted her eyes at him and giggled. Chi Mei, oh Chi Mei, just who are you? Yi Zichen muttered to himself, then pressed his lips into a smile. I'm not thinking about anything. All right, where did Xiaohu go? Chapter 1198. A Diviner's Soul. The soul core was slightly warm in his hand, and he could feel the domineering lightning-type energy wreaking havoc within it. Xiaohu became like this. That's right. This is just a strand of his soul. Absorbing his soul is the only way to form such a large soul core, said Chi Mei, clearly disappointed. Then can I ask you a question? Go ahead. Just now, there seemed to be a rift in the sky. I wonder. Yi Zichen hesitated. You talking about that? I don't know either. Chi Mei pursed her lips and said, I also saw that crack just now and specially asked Uncle Lu. However, Uncle Lu said that he didn't know what happened. Chi Mei shrugged, and then she smiled sweetly and said, Don't worry. All right, what's the point of thinking so much? She didn't know either? Yi Zichen had once thought there was something fishy going on, and that Chi Mei had absolutely nothing to do with it. However, her explanation just now was flawless, so Yi Zichen had no way of doubting her. Fine, you can have the diviner soul. It was absorbed by your people, so it should belong to you. He handed the diviner soul to Chi Mei, then put her hands behind her back and took a few steps back. This is for you. Don't give it back to me. Besides, a diviner soul is nothing to me. If I give it to you, you might need it in the future. As the saying goes, a scholar who hasn't seen for 3 days must be looked at in a new light. Just a while ago, you freeloaded off me for food and drinks, then you cheated on me for half a month for the sake of a sea-condensing pill. Now you don't even care about a diviner's soul, said Yi Zichen deliberately. Aha! Chi Mei didn't respond. Instead, she grinned at him and changed the topic. She looked at the bewildered heavenly sovereigns in the wildlands. What are you going to do with them? It was their turn. The Supremes had long since mentally prepared themselves, but when it really came down to it, they were still a bit scared. Even someone as strong as Xiao, who had been absorbed into a diviner soul core. How could they, the other Supremes? How do I deal with them? Isn't that up to you, big sister Chi Mei? For example, the Yao. I definitely can't touch them, right? Said Yi Zichen. Did the demons bully you? Chi Mei raised her brows. Master, Inhu, swear on my life that the demon race has never attacked young Master Yi. It was Chun Jianan's idea to capture young Master Ye's friend. Even when Chun Jianan attacked young Master Yi in the end, we didn't do anything. Inhu thumped his chest loudly as he answered. Is that so? But why do I remember that at the very beginning, those few from your demon clan, Yi Zichen's gaze landed on a few Yao. When they noticed his gaze, they hurriedly lowered their heads, not daring to meet his eyes. They all attacked me. If I didn't have an ultimate move, I wouldn't have been able to kill them. In the end, Inhu's face immediately turned the color of a pig's liver. He scratched his head, not knowing what to say. At the very beginning, the Yao and gods had indeed joined forces against Yi Zichen, but in the end, the ones who'd been bullied were their own. Forget it. I have to give Chi Mei face. You've all performed well, so I won't bicker with you. Thank you, young Master Yi. Inhu and the Yao Supremes all bowed respectfully. After that, Yi Zichen's gaze landed on the God Race Supremes. After staring at them for a few seconds, he snorted coldly and turned away. In the end, I'll settle things with you. Whoosh. In an instant, the hearts of the God Race's Supremes turned cold. From Yi Zichen's tone, it seemed there was no way he'd let them off easy. Considering their recent behavior, they couldn't blame Yi Zichen for treating them this way. The ones who'd attacked the most were the gods, and the ones who behaved the worst were also the gods. Most importantly, Chun Jianan had captured Yi Zichen's friends and dragged them down with him. Little did they know, just a short while ago, they'd rejoiced at Chun Jianan's actions. Furthermore, when he'd really attacked, none of them had stepped forward to stop him or even tried to dissuade him. People were always like this. You. Ignoring the gods, Yi Zichen clasped his hands behind his back and walked up to Jackdaw. In truth, during this time, the demons were the ones who'd committed the lightest crimes. When Yao and gods joined forces to deal with him, the demons hadn't done anything. When Chun Jianan and Yin were about to attack, Jackdaw just watched coldly from the sidelines. The Yao and gods had invited diviners, but the demons hadn't sent any. In short, although Jackdaw and the others were demons, their actions were just and honorable. Brother Yi, Jackdaw doesn't say much, but during this time my subordinates were the ones who attacked you the lightest. I'm sure you've seen that too, said Jackdaw solemnly. In truth, he wasn't the type of person who would explain things to others. Was there a problem? Then he'd settle it with his fists. That was Jackdaw's preferred way of handling things. However, he was facing a ruler. Settling it with his fists. Wasn't that just a fool's dream? You're right. I've seen it all. From start to finish, you didn't attack me at all. If you'd done the same thing to the Yao and gods, I wouldn't have hesitated to let you go. If you want to blame someone, blame it on the fact that you're demons. Yi Zichen's gaze instantly darkened. Demons. If it weren't for the demons, he'd still be living a leisurely, carefree life in the modern realm. If it weren't for the demons, his college roommates would still be alive and kicking. If it weren't for the demons, Xia Kiki wouldn't have died trying to block divine tribulation for him. If it weren't for the demons, things would have ended differently. The demons were wild with ambition. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the great war of gods and demons had been for the sake of plunder and invasion. Now, hundreds of thousands of years later, the gods and demons had put aside their grievances and developed in peace. However, all of this had taken place over hundreds of thousands of years. Yi Zichen hadn't even lived for 200 years. The demons' atrocities were still fresh in his mind. How could he not hate them? Jackdaw and the other demons hadn't done anything to harm Yi Zichen during this time, but his own kind had hurt Yi Zichen deeply. They were innocent, but they had to die. I'm sorry. I really want to let you go, but I can't. When Chi Mei heard Yi Zichen's decision, she glanced at Uncle Lu, then walked over to the demons. Jackdaw wanted to defend his people, to plead his last hope, but at that moment, let them go. A woman in a black cloak stepped out of the wilderness. Her enormous cloak covered her from head to toe. When she was about 100 meters away from Yi Zichen, she lifted the hood. Chapter 1199. The holy maiden of the demon race, the black-robed woman tapped the air with the tips of her feet, creating ripples in the air. She crossed 100 meters in just a few steps and arrived before Jackdaw and the others. Your Excellency, holy maiden. Jackdaw's pupils constricted. He hurriedly knelt on one knee and cowed out. The other demons did the same. Their gazes were a mixture of devotion and reverence as they gazed at the newcomer. All of you rise. Yi Zichen could only see her slightly parted lips through her black robes. He narrowed his eyes at her. At that moment, she took off her hood. One of her eyes was black, the other purple. Her hair was also half black, half purple. However, her skin wasn't as dark as the demons. On the contrary, it was the color of wheat that only humans possessed. The instant she lifted her hood, Yi Zichen's hand trembled. At the same time, the holy maiden smiled at him. Emperor Yi, long time no see. Yaij? After a while, Yi Zichen's voice trembled with astonishment. The holy maiden arched her brows and smiled noncommittally. She pursed her lips, a hint of playfulness in her eyes. I never would have guessed that Emperor Yi would still remember me. That's my good fortune. However, calling me Yige is one thing. We weren't even that close before. Her disdainful tone chilled Yi Zichen's heart. When he took note of her hair color and pupils, he guessed that Sun Yige had already become one with her other self. The one standing before her was no longer the timid class monitor who didn't dare speak loudly to anyone. She was the demon race's saintess, a stranger to him. Not far away, Chi Mei arched her brows. Her gaze flickered back and forth between Yi Zichen and Sun Yige. Gradually, her lips curved into a smile, but no one knew what she was smiling about. The demon's holy maiden. Yi Zichen's eyes were filled with helplessness. He could only purse his lips and say, Sun Yige, she's doing well. I originally wanted to use her as a guide to meet you. No matter what, you two had a past together. It's just that she's still the same as before. I'm worried that she'll make a fool of herself if she sees you. That'll damage my status as the Holy Maiden. The Holy Maiden smiled calmly. Then her eyes flashed as she looked at Yi Zichen. I'll come and take them away. I wonder if Emperor Yi will give me face? Go ahead. It didn't matter if she was the demon's Holy Maiden or Sun Yige. So long as he saw her face, Yi Zichen couldn't refuse. Perhaps it was because she felt guilty, or perhaps it was because of some other emotions. The Holy Maiden took a step to the side and opened up a path for them. At the same time, a charming smile appeared on her face. Many thanks for your benevolence, Emperor Yi. I will never forget this kindness. If Emperor Yi wishes to visit the demon realm in the future, I will definitely do my best as a host. Shortly after, she turned to the heavenly sovereigns of the demon clan. Let's go. The demon race's sky supremes followed the Holy Maiden and disappeared into the wilderness. Even after they disappeared, Yi Zichen stared fixedly in their direction. Hey, they're all gone. At this moment, Chi Mei waved her fair little hand in front of his eyes. Only then did Yi Zichen come to his senses. He arched his brows, and Chi Mei smirked. I never would have guessed, sweetie. You're so romantic, flirting everywhere you go. Even the demon's Holy Maiden had a relationship with you. TCH. How terrifying. I'm not familiar with the demon's Holy Maiden, but never mind. I can't explain things to you, said Yi Zichen. Hey, but sweetie. Chi Mei suddenly snuck up to Yi Zichen, her mouth almost touching his ear. Yi Zichen's heart trembled involuntarily. When Elder Lu saw this, he couldn't help but frown, but he said nothing. Who knows? You might really be able to conquer the world in the future. Yi Zichen scratched his head in bewilderment. He scratched his head and glanced at Chi Mei, whose eyes flashed with craftiness. She continued, based on your flirting personality, I'll let you handle the demon's Holy Maiden. I have a lot of influence over the Yao too. All we're missing now is a Divine Maiden. If you get the chance, you should get together with the Divine Maiden and unify the three realms. I'm just waiting. Yi Zichen knew Chi Mei wouldn't have anything good to say to him. When he heard this, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. You're too scared to return to the Yao realm? How am I supposed to leave now? You haven't even dealt with the gods yet. If I leave, who's going to hold the fort for you? Chi Mei's expression said, I'm just looking out for you. Yi Zichen really gave in. He cupped his fists and bowed, then turned to the other Sky Supremes. During this time, the God Sky Supremes had been tormented. Their thoughts were constantly wandering about, trying to figure out how to keep their puny little lives. When they sensed Yi Zichen's gaze, the Sky Supremes immediately tensed up. They stared straight at Yi Zichen, waiting for his judgment. They really were from the 8 divine mountains' great families. Normally, they might be able to band together to suppress Yi Zichen. But now, threaten him? No way. If they tried to suppress Yi Zichen, that would be the stupidest method of all. Everyone could see that this Yao Lord was deeply concerned about Yi Zichen, and there was even a ruler eyeing him like a tiger watching its prey. The Sky Supremes really wanted to cry. Even as Sky Supremes, they could be considered overlords on the Divine Mountains. But now that they were in the lower realms, diviners and rulers descended upon them like mad. They might as well live comfortably on the divine mountains. Which one of you is from the northern divine mountain sea of innocence? That was Yi Zichen's first words. That's me. A middle-aged man stepped out of the crowd. Yi Zichen glanced at him coolly, then saw him take out a token from his waist. He gave Chi Mei a meaningful glance, and she nodded back at him after looking at him. Come over to my side. Although Yi Zichen hadn't said anything about forgiving him, everyone present was smart. There was no way they wouldn't understand what he meant. The middle-aged man was delighted. When he'd heard Xiao Hu say the Sea of Innocence had saved Yi Zichen's life, he'd assumed he'd be fine. However, he'd only thought about it. Until the end, no one could predict what the result would be. It wasn't until Yi Zichen asked him to stand by his side that he finally relaxed. The people of the Four Directions Palace, come over here as well. A bald Sky Supreme immediately stepped out of the crowd, his expression blank. Even Chi Mei looked at Yi Zichen in surprise. She hadn't known he was connected to the Four Directions Palace. Chapter 1200. Performance? Performance? This left the celestial race's Sky Supremes at a loss. Could it be that he wants them to put on a show? The Sky Supremes couldn't help but mutter to themselves. This really put them in a difficult position. After all, these heavenly sovereigns were all reputable figures on the Divine Mountain. They'd always focused on their own cultivation. In their spare time, they might listen to a song or watch a performance. But those who made a living by making people smile were the lowest rung of society. Now, they were being asked to perform? Did they want to lose face? Obviously, they didn't care about their reputation. After a few seconds of hesitation, a Sky Supreme, wielding a pair of hammers, stepped out of the crowd. He was more than 2 meters tall, and all the muscles on his body looked like they were about to explode. However, what made people's eyes widen was that he was actually using his life treasure as a juggling tool to perform acrobatics. With someone taking the lead, the other Sky Supremes didn't hesitate. They danced with their weapons, sang and danced, swallowed their swords. It was like the 8 immortals crossing the sea, each displaying their own divine abilities. The only one who didn't move was Chun Jianan. In truth, he'd wanted to go up too, but in the end he'd chosen to save face. Chi Mei's mouth fell open. As far as she could remember, she'd never seen a Sky Supreme perform acrobatics. The 2 Sky Supremes from the Sea of Innocence and the Four Directions Pavilion felt their faces heat up. This was too embarrassing. They couldn't help but glance at Yi Zichen, then at the Sky Supremes doing their best to put on a show. They silently closed their eyes. What were they doing? Even Yi Zichen was at a loss. He'd told them to perform, and they'd really do it? Had they cultivated their brains so hard that they'd gone stupid? Didn't they see what he was doing? If you called it a performance, that was fine. But what were they doing? Acrobatics wasn't exciting or funny. In poetry, writing left him speechless. Furthermore, their folk dance was an eyesore. Stop! Yi Zichen couldn't bear to watch any longer, so he called the Sky Supremes to a halt. What are you guys doing here? The Sky Supremes stopped in confusion. Didn't Yi Zichen tell them to perform? Why did they stop now? Hey, why did you ask them to stop? It's pretty good. If you want to see it, go home and have a look yourself. If this kind of performance was good enough to watch, Yi Zichen was starting to doubt Chi Mei's sense of beauty. Moreover, his goal was not to let them perform. You guys are heavenly sovereigns. Don't you care about your face? After scolding Chi Mei, Yi Zichen looked helplessly at the group of Sky Supremes. I'm ashamed of you. Sir, it's not you. Just as someone in the crowd spoke up, Yi Zichen glared back. What did I do? I asked you to perform, but did I ask you to swallow your swords? I asked you to perform because... Yi Zichen rubbed his fingers together. This time, the Sky Supremes finally noticed. Only now did they understand exactly what Yi Zichen wanted. The Sky Supremes frantically pulled down their spatial rings and lined up to deliver them to Yi Zichen. Money was just a worldly possession. So long as they were alive, they could get anything back. Before long, 12 spatial rings appeared in his hands. These were the spatial rings of Sky Supremes. They were far more valuable than the ones Yi Zichen had robbed the Axe Gang at the foot of the Divine Mountains. Yi Zichen scanned the rings with his divine sense. The space inside was frighteningly large, and the resources inside were quite impressive. Not bad. He nodded at the Sky Supremes in satisfaction, who smiled apologetically and nodded in response. Yi Zichen ignored the Sky Supremes and turned to Chen Jiannan. The other Sky Supremes looked at him as well. He was the only one who hadn't paid a protection fee. Some of his friends sent him private transmissions, telling him to hurry up and hand over his spatial rings. Chen Jiannan was vexed. He really was vexed. He'd been a proud son of heaven ever since he was a child. Everyone had always looked up to him. When he was only an immortal king, the Lightning Emperor's estate accepted him as an inner sect disciple. From then on, his meteoric rise had skyrocketed. But now he'd been captured by an Earth Supreme and had to pay a ransom. He was absolutely furious. "What are you just standing there for? What? Do you want to die?" Yi Zichen's words snapped Chen Jiannan out of his daze. He was a fish on the chopping block. Even if he was furious, what could he do? Could he be stronger than the Yao Ceiling Pagoda? Could he be stronger than a ruler? Chen Jiannan gnashed his teeth. He looked down and plucked the ring off his finger, then placed it in Yi Zichen's open palm. Yi Zichen scanned the ring with his divine sense. As expected of the leader of the Sky Supremes, Chen Jiannan was a 9th-stage Sky Supreme, and the wealth in his ring was comparable to that of all the other Supremes combined. There were mountains of celestial coins and countless divine herbs and medicines. However, where did your divine sword go? It broke. Didn't you see? Chen Jiannan furrowed his brows. Don't try to trick me. That broken divine sword isn't the same one you used to begin with. Do you think I don't know? Hurry up. I like your sword. Hand it over, snorted Yi Zichen. Don't go too far. Do you want to die? Ding. A divine sword stabbed into the ground right in front of Yi Zichen's feet. Yi Zichen smiled calmly at Chen Jiannan's livid expression, then took out the sword and handed it to the ruler. Help me erase his mark. With Qi Mei's help, Elder Lu reached out and wiped the blade. Chen Jiannan immediately felt his connection to the sword disappear. He coughed up a mouthful of blood. He'd nourished the sword with his blood for thousands of years. Now that it had changed masters, his strength had dropped by more than half. Not bad. The two words, "Listen to the sea," were engraved on the sword. That was probably its name. Yi Zichen fiddled with the sword and couldn't help but chuckle. In the past, he'd only used immortal and demigod artifacts. Now he finally had a divine artifact he could use. All right, I can feel your sincerity. You're all safe now. Yi Zichen put the sword back into the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, then turned to the Sky Supremes. But Chen Jiannan, you can't leave. What do you mean? Roared Chen Jiannan. I've already fulfilled all your demands. You, don't get so worked up. Yi Zichen shook his head and sighed. You've passed my test, but you haven't passed Qi Mei's test yet. Isn't that right, Qi Mei? As he spoke, Yi Zichen shot her a frantic glance. Chapter 1201. Farewell. As soon as Yi Zichen spoke, Qi Mei knew she'd have to shoulder the blame. He clearly didn't want to let Chen Jiannan go, but in the end, he'd drag her into this. However, when she thought about it, she didn't have a good impression of the Xiao family to begin with. Although she didn't want to deal with a puny Sky Supreme, if Yi Zichen wanted to take care of him, she could help him out. That's right, I never said I'd let you go. Compared to Yi Zichen, Qi Mei was even more decisive. She shot a look at Elder Lu, and the surrounding supreme beings saw the elder gently point his right hand forward, and Chen Jiannan disappeared from everyone's line of sight. No one knew what happened to him, but Elder Lu's methods made the Supreme's hearts tremble. A ruler was worthy of his reputation. He truly lived up to his reputation of being the ruler of all things. Not bad, not bad. Yi Zichen smiled in satisfaction. Chen Jiannan had tried to kill him as soon as he'd arrived, killed his colleagues, and forced him to hole up in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda for 3 years. If Yi Zichen let someone like that go, he'd really lost his mind. I did well, didn't I? Shouldn't you reward me, sweetie? Qi Mei clasped her hands behind her back and giggled. She pouted and blinked like a little girl. Don't mess around. What do I have to reward you for? Said Yi Zichen helplessly. How could you not? The Xinyuan sword and the Yao Ceiling Pagoda are both peerless divine artifacts. If you gave me either one, I'd be so grateful I'd cry tears of gratitude. Qi Mei's eyes narrowed into slits as she glanced at the Yao ceiling pagoda. She wants the Yao ceiling pagoda too? Yi Zichen couldn't help but mutter to himself. That shouldn't be the case. If Chi Mei really wanted the Yao ceiling pagoda, she could have taken it 3 years ago. There was no need for her to wait until now. Could it be that she didn't think she was strong enough, but now that a ruler was here? Look, you're scared. I'm just joking. When she saw Yi Zichen remain silent, Chi Mei reached out and grabbed his arm. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. It doesn't matter who has this treasure. Don't you think so, sweetie? Miss, we should go. If we delay any longer, Xiaohu might flee the outside. When I attacked him, I felt that he might have already become a sovereign. When he saw Chi Mei and Yi Zichen acting so intimately, the elder knit his brows. Then hurry up and go. It's not like I can't go back myself, Chi Mei replied. Miss, Elder Lu's tone instantly darkened. Yi Zichen understood why the old ruler had spoken up. Coincidentally, he didn't want Chi Mei to stick to him, so he spoke up for her. You can go back with Elder Lu. I can deal with these guys myself. It's not a good deal to be rushed. Chi Mei wrinkled her nose and snorted at Yi Zichen, then inexplicably swiped at the mountain range where Danglong was sealed. Suddenly, a wisp of fierce beast Danglong's soul appeared in her hand. At the same time, she tossed a pearl towards Yi Zichen. Keep your soul, pearl, Yun safe. I have a use for Danglong's soul, so I'll take it. As soon as she finished speaking, Chi Mei walked directly in front of Elder Lu. Everyone saw a flash of fluorescent light, and they, along with the members of the demon clan, disappeared from the wilderness. When Chi Mei left, Yi Zichen let out a long sigh. Yi Zichen had seen countless women, but Chi Mei was the only one he'd ever encountered. If he wasn't careful, he'd fall in her trap. Sealing Danglong's soul pearl Yun had most likely used up too much of its soul power. As a result, Yi Zichen tried to contact it, but received no response at all. The artifact spirit of a divine artifact needed time to recover its divine power, so he might as well toss it into the Yao ceiling pagoda and let it recover on its own. If Xin Yuan Xiang came out of seclusion and saw it, she might be able to find a shortcut to recovery. You guys! Yi Zichen glanced at the Sky Supremes who'd yet to leave. In truth, they'd wanted to leave long ago, but because of Chun Jiannan's incident, they hadn't left. Now that Yi Zichen had spoken, even though there were no rulers here, he had the Yao ceiling pagoda. He wasn't someone they could afford to offend. Your Excellency, please speak. There's no need to be so nervous. Yi Zichen gestured for them to relax, then said, You've already used money to redeem your freedom. I'm a man of my word, so I won't harm you again. However, before you leave, there's something I need to warn you about. The Supremes listened attentively. Yi Zichen spoke up. Once we return to the Divine Mountains, please keep your mouths shut. I don't want to hear anything about this place from your mouths, especially not the Xin Yuan sword or the Yao ceiling pagoda. Your Excellency, the entire Three Realms knows about the Xin Yuan sword. Even if we don't talk about the Yao ceiling pagoda, those two diviners will. I just want you to keep your mouths shut, said Yi Zichen in a low voice. Yes, that's right. We definitely won't say anything when we get back. Quite a few of the Sky Supremes swore on their inner demons. After a moment's thought, the remaining Sky Supremes swore as well. Once they were done, Yi Zichen nodded calmly at them. Let's go. The Supremes reacted as if they'd been granted amnesty. One by one, they took their revenge and vanished from the wilderness. The Sky Supremes of the Sea of Innocence cupped their fists at Yi Zichen. Brother Yi, our Sea of Innocence will never forget your kindness. It's nothing. Your Sea of Innocence helped me out before, so I'm just returning the favor, said Yi Zichen with a smile. Let me ask you something. Is the Wish God in your Sea of Innocence? Brother Yi, do you know the Wish God? Asked the Sky Supreme. We're old acquaintances. How has he been lately? The Wish God's been doing well. Seeing that Yi Zichen wasn't in the mood to continue chatting, the Sky Supreme didn't pursue the matter. He simply nodded and said, If Brother Yi has the time to visit my Sea of Innocence, I will be sure to show you my hospitality. Farewell. Farewell. After the Sea of Innocence's Sky Supreme left, the Supremes of the Four Directions Palace cupped their fists respectfully. Brother Yi, I'll take my leave as well. Ezekiel nodded at the Supremes, then continued. When you get back, say hello to Chui 12 for me. Tell him I'll go drink with him when I have time. Also, tell Lu Jing that I'm in the God realm. I never would have guessed that Brother Yi was a friend of the 12th and 17th Highness. All right, when I get back, if I can meet them in person, I'll be sure to send word, said the Four Directions Palace's Sky Supreme with a smile. Yi Zichen smiled calmly, and the Sky Supreme cupped his fists once more. Chapter 1202. Drinking, let's go as well. He said this to Xue Qi and the others. Although their strength in the lower three realms wasn't bad, in the face of these Sky Supremes, they were far too insignificant. Just now, with outsiders present, Xue Qi, Stone, and Xuelon could only wait to the side. Now that they were gone, Stone was the first to approach Yi Zichen. He punched Yi Zichen in the shoulder. Kid, where the hell have you been all these years? Even a rough man like Stone's eyes were somewhat red at this moment. Yi Zichen vaguely remembered when he'd first arrived in the village. Stone had taken care of him like a big brother. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. He'd become a Supreme, while Stone was still a Sky Immortal. The gap between them was as wide as a chasm, but their relationship wouldn't grow distant just because of this minor difference in cultivation. I became a god. Yi Zichen didn't know how to explain, so all he could do was say, I became a god. When Stone heard this, he was stunned, then overjoyed. Great. Becoming a god is a good thing. Kid, you really do have a conscience. After becoming a god, you even remembered to come back and visit us brothers. Today, we won't go back until we're drunk. No problem, said Yi Zichen with a hearty laugh. Yi Zichen laughed heartily. But before that, shouldn't we pay our respects to our fellow disciples? The Leisure House's sect leader had been captured in Maple City of the Immortal Region. Everyone was terrified, but when Xue Qi and the others returned, the sect returned to normal. Half a month, everyone in the sect mourned in silence for the fallen. This was one of Leisure House's rules. Every time a disciple died, it was like this. However, half a month later, it was time to celebrate Yi Zichen's return. News of Yi Zichen's return wasn't limited to the Leisure House. Everyone from the Heavenly Court, Underworld, Immortal Region, and Endless Beast Region who knew Yi Zichen had come. For a long time no see, Yi Zichen hadn't rested at all during the banquet. After sending off the people from the Beast Region, Oxhead of the Underworld walked up to Yi Zichen, accompanied by Horseface. They were old acquaintances, and Yi Zichen was happy to see them again. Long time no see. Why aren't Xie Bian and the others here? 4 of the 8 ghost marshals of the underworld died. Horseface and I have already arrived. If old Xie and the rest still come, what will happen to the underworld? Oxhead joked. That's true. Yi Zichen nodded. Look at how stingy the underworld is. As the commander of the Heavenly Court, he still came. Emperor Yi, I'm telling you, OL Xie isn't giving you face. At that moment, Thunder God walked over with a wine glass. Oxhead smiled and said, I won't defend old Xie if you put it that way. Emperor Yi, I also think that Lao Xie isn't giving you face. Who said I didn't give Emperor Yi face? Step forward. Yi Zichen didn't expect Xie Bian to walk over with a laugh, while the White Impermanence in turn, who had a short story with Yi Zichen, followed beside him. Why are you here? Oxhead raised his eyebrows. The Necropolis Emperor of the Bane sent me here. Xie Bian smiled, then grabbed a glass of wine with his right hand. Oh, this doesn't seem like our local immortal brew. Emperor Yi brought it back from the God Realm, laughed Oxhead. It's a good thing you came. If you hadn't, you'd have suffered greatly. Ha ha, what a coincidence. Xie Bian drained the entire flask in one gulp, then wiped his mouth and laughed. Good wine. Emperor Yi, you're a member of the Immortal Region. Not contacting us for 100 years is a bit too much. I'm going to pick a fight. Swearin grabbed his beard and laughed heartily. This senior, who dedicated his entire life to the Immortal Region, was prepared to stay here for the rest of his life. Given his strength, he could easily ascend to the God Realm, but he preferred the grass and trees here. In his own words, I'm old. I don't have a heart to roam the world anymore. He'd rather stay here and watch his descendants grow up and wait until the end of his lifespan. He didn't want to roam the god realm anymore. He really couldn't. Fine, fine, fine. It's my fault. I'll drink 3 cups as punishment. The atmosphere at the banquet was joyous. With so many powerhouses gathered in one place, it was truly a grand occasion. Many immortal kings who'd heard of the banquet wanted to fight their way into the circle. But when they saw the people who'd just arrived, even immortal kings didn't dare to do so. The people who'd come were simply too senior and high in status. After 3 rounds of wine, everyone was pretty much done. The old friends found a place to chat. Horseface was the one who talked the most. Although he usually only said, "Big Brother Oxhead is right," and always followed Oxhead around, he became a chatterbox after drinking. He talked about everything from the underworld brat to the 10 Yama Kings. If Oxhead hadn't knocked him out, he might have even talked about the great sacred emperor equaling heavens. "I'm drunk." Everyone just treated it as a joke. Oxhead laughed along with the other immortals after Horseface lay down. "It's fine. People like us really do have a belly full of bitterness. Taking advantage of our drunkenness to pour it all out is actually pretty good," laughed the god of thunder. "Emperor Yi, how long are you planning on staying this time?" asked the god of fortune. "I should be heading back soon." Yi Zichen wasn't alone. He had a faction backing him. He'd provoked the Lightning Emperor's Shao family several times, and the Supremes who'd returned to the Divine Mountains couldn't be trusted. Right now, upheaval was still in its infancy. If he didn't keep an eye on it, he wouldn't feel confident. Besides, he was now a Supreme. The laws here couldn't possibly let him stay for too long. The God Realm. Someone sighed softly, but the surrounding people's expressions turned to one of longing. They were different from swearing. They hadn't reached the point where they'd die of old age. They still wanted to take another step forward and see for themselves what the God Realm was like. "Emperor Yi, what on earth is the God Realm like?" The God Realm? As he described the God Realm in his mind, the surrounding immortals' gazes shifted once more. The 9 divine mountains? The gods, Yao and demons are friends. The God Emperor, Yao Emperor, and Demon Emperor? In short, everything was new and novel to them. This only increased their thirst for the God Realm even more. "I really don't know when I'll be able to ascend," muttered the god of thunder. By now, of the people Yi Zichen was familiar with, only the god of thunder and the god of fortune hadn't ascended yet. A few years ago, third Prince Neza successfully passed the tribulation and ascended. His father followed closely behind and ascended to the God Clan. The 2 old men, Yu Lao and Taishang Lao Jun, seemed to have encountered some kind of evil, but they also ascended a few months ago, leaving the god of thunder and the god of fortune to depend on each other. Yi Zichen patted him on the shoulder. This wasn't something that could be rushed. Yi Zichen inexplicably recalled something. He couldn't help but ask the god of thunder and the god of fortune. Chapter 1203. Return to the Protoss. Although the god race had communication jade slips, in Yi Zichen's opinion, this method of communication was too outdated. Ever since he ascended, he had complained more than once about the communication methods of the Protoss. Now that he had returned to the lower realm, he might as well bring the advanced technology here to the Protoss. "Not yet," replied Thunder God after a moment's thought. "Emperor Yi, why do you ask?" "I want to bring them to the God Realm." With that, Yi Zichen told the Lightning Emperor and the others about his plan, then added an explanation. "This way, even if someone ascends, we can still communicate through the group chat. We won't lose contact after ascending." The Thunder Emperor hesitated for a moment before saying, "In that case, I'll go back now. Now that our information network here is complete, I'll discuss this with the Heavenly Emperor. I believe he will agree to it. Then let's go back and discuss it with the Great Emperor." Back then, when we established the information network, the Underworld and the Heavenly Court built it at the same time. If Emperor Yi brings people from both sides over at the same time, perhaps our chances of success will be higher. In the blink of an eye, it was dusk 3 days later. Everyone familiar with Yi Zichen had gathered outside Maple City's gates. Everyone's eyes were filled with reluctance to part ways with Yi Zichen. Of course, some of them looked at the dozen or so people by Yi Zichen's side enviously. These were the people the Underworld and Heavenly Court had sent to follow Yi Zichen back to the God Realm. They were all top-tier existences in their respective fields and had distinguished themselves from their countless competitors. Knowing that they could go to the divine race, these people were so excited that they did not sleep the whole night. "You're leaving already?" Shuiqi walked out from the crowd with a sigh. Their relationship with Yi Zichen was one of true friendship. Disregarding the people Yi Zichen had known in the modern realm, Shuiqi and Stone were the closest to Yi Zichen. "I have to go. I can't stay here forever." In truth, Yi Zichen's words had a deeper meaning. He couldn't stay here forever. On the surface, the Master of the Laws would restrict his existence and force him to return to the god race. Secondly, he was also telling himself that the modern world was his final home. With his current identity, status, and wealth, he could live a muddle-headed life. But why was he still moving forward? Wasn't it all for the sake of returning to the bustling metropolis? "Hey, Master of the Laws, I know you're definitely watching. Hurry up and deliver it to me," he shouted towards the sky, and not long after, a cowherd riding a green ox appeared in front of everyone. Azure Ox walked in front of the crowd. He looked at Yi Zichen and the other agents, but didn't say anything. He merely pointed forward, causing a formation to appear beneath Yi Zichen's feet. The reluctance in the eyes of the surrounding people grew, but they also knew that they should not urge him to stay at this time. "All right, don't be like this. It's not like we can never meet again." Yi Zichen smiled at the deities, then took out his phone and waved it in front of them. "See you in the group chat." Could the information network of the upper realm succeed? No one could give an accurate answer until the very end. However, the moment Yi Zichen had this thought, it meant that the upper three realms had reached a new milestone. It was just like how his upheaval had wreaked havoc on the three realms of God, Yao, and Demon. Ancient trees towered into the sky, and strange, jagged rocks littered the landscape. Yi Zichen knew they'd already returned to the God realm when he saw the ancient trees, each one of which had grown for who knew how long. Based on the intensity of the spiritual energy here, they weren't in the vicinity of a city. Divine power outside the cities of the lower lands was extremely difficult to absorb and refine. It could only be absorbed through the transfer formations of the cities. As a result, every city in the lower lands was home to an ocean of humans. Even entering required a sufficient amount of money. In truth, this created a situation of extreme polarity. The strength of the people in the villages outside of the Divine Mountain would make the people in the cities fall further and further behind. Fortunately, cultivators lived for a long time. If any of the villages could produce a genius, it would be like a man rising to the heavens along with his fowls and dogs. Strange, I didn't go through the time corridor this time. His experience of going through the time corridor was still fresh in his mind. He'd snatched the Devil Dharma body technique from that little warlock. But this time, they hadn't seen the time corridor. They'd appeared directly beneath the Divine Mountains. Could it be that the time corridor really appears at random? Yi Zichen knit his brows. If that was really the case, he'd just stolen a supreme Dharma body technique. Wasn't that too much of a loss? The scientists who'd come with Yi Zichen looked around curiously. Quite a few of them pulled out their tools to analyze the age of the surrounding rocks and ancient trees. Enough, stop your research. You'll have plenty of time to do so in the future. Yi Zichen stopped the scientists, then spread his divine awareness outwards. After confirming Raging Flame City's location, he swept them up and disappeared. Raging Flame City. The establishment of Upheaval's headquarters brought a new lease on life to this city, which had been famous for hundreds of thousands of years. Now, no one dared treat it as an ordinary mortal district city anymore. With Upheaval's support, it had become the capital of the hundreds of cities beneath the northern Divine Mountain. Both inside and outside the city, there was an endless stream of cars and people. Due to the influx of new residents, Raging Flame City had even begun to expand. When Yi Zichen and the others returned, they saw quite a few craftsmen building a second wall. Upheaval's headquarters was located right in the center of the city. It had been replaced by the city Lord's Manor. Although Upheaval hadn't been established for long, its rapid growth struck fear into the hearts of many of the Divine Mountains clans. The people of the Divine Mountains naturally didn't care about a group of immortal kings and sky immortals. What they feared was 1,000 years from now, when Upheaval's members broke through to Supremes. Then what would happen to the Divine Mountains territory? Upheaval's headquarters looked imposing and imposing. In front of the gates sat 2 towering roars, flanked by 2 coiling dragon pillars. The dragons weren't lit, but their ferocious auras were terrifying. For burly early-stage, immortal kings stood in front of the gates. Each of them had a scarlet blaze lion by their side. Just as Ezechin was about to enter, one of the men stopped him. He spoke in a formal, meticulous tone, and the scarlet blaze lion by his side snarled at him. Chapter 1204. Upheaval 3 years later. The 10-odd informers behind Ezechin were all shocked when they sensed the man's aura. The gatekeepers were all immortal kings. This kind of power could probably destroy the heavenly court and the underworld with the flip of a hand. However, judging from his expression, he didn't seem to recognize Emperor Yi. Before coming here, hadn't Emperor Yi told them that he'd founded Upheaval? Ezechin, who'd retreated to the bottom of the stairs, couldn't help but smile wryly. It was a bit awkward to be stopped by his own subordinates. "You don't recognize me?" He looked at the men in a probing manner. The man who was guarding the door was startled after hearing this, and couldn't help but ask carefully, "You are?" Ezechin couldn't help but sigh dejectedly when he heard the man's reply. "It seems like I'm too low-key, to the point that the gang members don't recognize me." The atmosphere was rather awkward, but what could Ezechin do? He couldn't blame them. They were just following the rules. "Forget it. You guys go do your own things." Ezechin rubbed his nose and walked over to the shade of a nearby tree, then leaned against it and sent Wei Jie a message. Before long, an incredibly beautiful woman emerged from Upheaval's headquarters. "Elder Yu." The immortal kings guarding the door all nodded at her. The woman also nodded slightly, then stood in front of the door and kept looking around. "This." Ezechin walked out from the shade of the tree when he saw the newcomer and raised his hand. The newcomer was one of Upheaval's 6 founding human immortals, Yu Zhilan. When she saw Ezechin, her eyes lit up with delight. She jogged up to him and bowed in the manner of a subordinate. "My lord, you've returned." "HM? Why didn't Wei Jie come out?" "What? You've been the gang leader for so long that you're putting on airs." "Sir, you've misunderstood. Sir Wei Jie is not in Flame City right now." After receiving your message, he quickly informed his subordinates to come and fetch you. "Lord Wei has worked hard for the faction and is loyal to you. Please understand, Lord." Actually, Ezechin was just joking when he said that. He didn't expect Yu Zhilan to give such a serious explanation. What's more, there was a hint of anxiety in her expression. Something was wrong. Ezechin smiled at her, then spoke. "All right, I understand Wei Jie's loyalty. Let's not talk here. Let's go in and chat. Please." Yu Zhilan took half a step back, then followed Ezechin inside. "Did you all hear what Elder Yu said just now?" One of the immortal kings guarding the door asked. "She said Boss Wei is loyal and devoted to that person. Doesn't that mean that person just now is the person behind Upheaval?" "That's the one who killed a Deva's disciple right in front of him and forced him to return in defeat. What on earth was I doing?" The man who'd stopped Ezechin scratched his head in frustration. Yangshin Palace Hall. Since Ezechin didn't want too many people to know of his existence, Yu Zhilan brought him here. Upheaval was such a large organization, so it was only natural that a lot of things happened in the middle of its operations. During his free time, Wei Jie was used to sitting alone and watching the night scenery. Only elders and above could enter this place, and it was rather secluded. Wei Jie is really enjoying himself. In the past few years, Ezechin had been bullied by Chen Jianan and company, so he was a bit jealous when he saw the heart-nurturing palace. "My lord, Wei Jie." Yu Zhilan tried to defend him again, but Ezechin couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. "Hey, that's a bit strange. Every time I say something bad about Wei Jie, you get all worked up? There's something going on between the two of you." Yu Zhilan inexplicably blushed despite herself. "Wei Jie and I got married last year." No wonder Wei Jie was in such a hurry. He hadn't expected them to get married. Ezechin stared blankly at Yu Zhilan's blushing face. After a moment's hesitation, He took out a water-type spiritual pearl from the Yao ceiling pagoda. It wasn't a high-grade pearl, but it was an immortal artifact. However, it could replenish moisture at any time and keep one's skin hydrated. Yi Zichen had obtained it from a female Sky Supremes while robbing them. There was no point in keeping it, so he might as well offer it to her. I didn't participate in the wedding, so take this pearl as a congratulatory gift. Your Excellency, this... Take it. He shoved the pearl into Yu Zhilan's hands. Although she tried to refuse, when she sensed the pearl's uniqueness, her refusal weakened a bit. She was a woman, after all. There was no such thing as a woman who didn't like making herself more beautiful. When Yi Zichen saw her little movements, he couldn't help but purse his lips into a smile. Then, she sat down in the hall and spoke. Then she sat down and said, "In the past 3 years I was gone, upheavals developed quite well. Look, all the guards are immortal kings. Scarlet Flame Lions, too. They seem pretty expensive, don't they?" Scarlet Flame Lions were Yao, but they weren't divine beasts. However, their combat strength was extraordinary. Scarlet Flame Lions were as strong as human immortals, and adult Scarlet Flame Lions could even reach the supreme level. The demon race had agreed to the human race's purchase and trade of this demon beast, but it was very expensive. That's right. When Yi Zichen mentioned the gang, Yu Zhilan's aura changed. Upheaval is now, without a doubt, the #1 faction in the lower lands. We have over 300,000 immortal kings and countless sky immortals and human immortals. In truth, Scarlet Flame Lions are only second-grade battle beasts. Every immortal king in the gang has one. We still have 6,000 Spectre horses in our gang. They are for the use of the branch hall masters and above. Then aren't we tight on finances? Asked Yi Zichen in astonishment. Your Excellency, we no longer need to pay for our finances. Our net profit per quarter is estimated at 4 billion Celeste. 4 billion? Yi Zichen was truly shocked. When upheaval first formed, that was like a bottomless pit. Several billion Celeste was gone in just a few days. In order to stabilize upheaval's daily expenses, Yi Zichen had racked his brains. In just 3 years, the gang had undergone such earth-shattering changes. If we had a business genius, I think we'd be able to earn more than 4 billion Celeste. Although we're working with the Skyspan Trading Company, and because we're a major client, they only take 3% of the profits. That's still no small sum. In terms of trade, we're at a huge disadvantage. Wei Jie has told me more than once that he wants to establish a trading company, but he has no connections. If we had a trading company, we'd be able to sell our goods to the Yao and demons, instead of just selling to the Skyspan Trading Company and letting them make all the money. The Skyspan Trading Company. That was his concubine's family business. In truth, selling it to them wouldn't be a loss. In any case, they were family. However, Yi Zichen also felt that since the gang had already developed to this point, they really did need a trading company. As for who to choose from, Chapter 1205. Outside Azure, Qilin Village, Zwamo below the Divine Mountains, there were many ways for the villages outside the cities to earn Celeste. Hunting wild beasts, selling them, mining, but all of these had a certain degree of danger. The most stable and direct way was to grow herbs. As such, under normal circumstances, all villages, large, medium, and small, would open up a place suitable for growing herbs outside the village. This was also the main source of income for the entire village. In a medicinal garden in a village outside Azure Qilin City, 2 women carried baskets on their backs. At noon, the sun at the foot of the Divine Mountain was frighteningly hot. However, the 2 women in plain clothes braved the scorching sun, sweating profusely as they plucked one herb after another. Because these herbs were most suitable to be picked at noon, they could be sold for a few more Celeste when they were sold. Big sisters, Ramo, let's rest for a bit. My back is so sore. The one who spoke was a girl who looked like she'd just come of age. Her eyes were full of mischievous intelligence. Her hands were pitch black, and her face was filled with exhaustion. The other woman raised her head. Through the brim of her hat, it was possible to tell that she was the tower head of the treasure tower, Mo, who wielded absolute power and wealth in the lower realms. When she heard this, she placed a hand on her forehead, and looked into the distance. After that, she looked at the little girl beside her, and a gentle smile appeared on her face. Then Lil Ting, go rest. I'll gather the rest. How can I? The girl frowned, then smiled slyly and grabbed Zwamo's arm. Big sisters Mo, let's just rest together. It's still early, so it won't be too late for us to gather later. The little girl pouted and acted coquettishly. Mo could only nod helplessly, unable to resist her coquettishness. All right, I'll listen to you. They sat down in the shade of a nearby tree, then laid down her basket and faced the sky. Mo also put down her basket, took off her hat, and wiped away the sweat on her face. It was hard to imagine that Mo, who'd once been able to summon wind and rain in the lower realms, would fall to such a state in the divine realm. Fortunately, Mo wasn't as spoiled as other noble young ladies. She could adapt to starting from scratch. Big sisters Mo, don't you have any other friends here? After lying down for a while, the little girl sat up and stared at Mo with her large eyes. There should be. It's just that we ascended at different times. The place below the sacred mountain is so big. I have no idea where they are. Mo caressed the girl's long hair as she spoke. The girl pursed her lips and reached into her pocket. In her pocket was 100 Celeste note. When she had come with Mo, one of the village elders had given it to her in exchange for asking Mo a question. Sisters Mo? She licked her lips. When she saw Mo turn to look at her, she nervously clutched the Celeste in her pocket. Only then did she make up her mind. Why don't you accept Nan's pursuit? Mo was startled when she heard this. She looked at the little girl meaningfully. The little girl became more and more timid under her gaze. In the end, she did not dare to look at her and lowered her head. Wangan asked you to ask, right? Yes. The girl pursed her lips, somewhat dejected. She took out the Celeste note and placed it on the ground. Brother Nan gave me 100 Celeste notes on my way here. He told me to ask big sisters Mo, you little money grubber. Mo tapped the girl's forehead, then placed the Celeste note back in her hand. Go back and tell him not to waste any more time with me. I already have someone I like. Is that so? The girl scratched her head and giggled. Was he your Tao partner in the lower realms? No, he never accepted me. Bitterness flashed through Zwamo's eyes. How is that possible? The girl gasped. In her eyes, Mo was the most perfect person in the world. She was good-looking, had a gentle personality, and was an immortal king. In the outside world, countless people would definitely try to woo someone like her. But that person refused to accept her? What's so impossible about that? He has many more outstanding people by his side. They love him more than I do, and they're more courageous than me. Compared to them, I really can't compare. But regardless of whether he likes me or not, I can't possibly like anyone else. Mo pursed her lips and smiled. The girl scowled, her heart aching for Mo, sensing Mo's dispirited mood. She leapt to her feet, put her hands on her hips, and snorted. Big sisters Mo, tell me who he is. If I Ting catch him, he's Yi Zichen. After a moment's hesitation, Mo didn't know why she'd blurted it out. Perhaps it was because no one here recognized him, which was why she could speak his name so openly. Yi Zichen? When the girl heard this, she froze. As for why she was stunned, a few years ago, a Grandmaster Yi by the name of Yi Zichen had risen to fame in the lower realms. Rumor had it that he'd fought a half-step ruler from the Lightning Emperor's estate in Raging Flame City and forced him into retreat. Rumor had it that Grandmaster Yi's true form was a supreme divine beast of the Yao race, a fire Qilin. Some said he was a dragon. Others said he was a supreme expert of the demon race, and that the Shao family's ruler had a grudge against him. That was why they'd fought. In short, according to the rumors, Yi Zichen was everything in existence. Big sisters Mo, the Yi Zichen you're talking about isn't that Grandmaster Yi, right? The girl gulped and laughed dryly. If it really was Grandmaster Yi, even if she had 1,000 years, she wouldn't be able to do anything to him. How could it be him? Do you know who that Grandmaster Yi is? The Yi Zichen I'm talking about ascended less than 5 years ago. How could he possibly be able to fight a half-step ruler? Although Blue Qilin Village was backward, she'd still heard a few rumors. So Amo naturally knew that some of them were just rumors, but she couldn't deny that Grandmaster Yi was no ordinary person. She'd never seen Yizichin clearly, but the possibility that he could force a half-step ruler to retreat in 5 years was too low. So Amo gathered her thoughts, looked up at the sun, put her basket back on her back, and put on her hat. "We've rested enough. Let's get back to work." "All right." The girl obediently shouldered her basket. At that moment, a youth in cotton clothes, who looked no older than 12 or 13, hurried over. As he ran, he shouted, "Big Sisters Wemo, go back to the village and take a look. Big Sisters Wemo, why don't you go back to the village and take a look?" What? Chapter 1206. Upheaval really was too weak. Because Blue Cheelin Village wasn't connected to any of the major cities, it felt as if it had been abandoned by the Divine Mountains. However, the villagers loved this aloof feeling. There was no internal strife. The villagers were simple and peaceful. It had been like this for thousands of years. Until, boom, a massive explosion reverberated through Blue Cheelin Village. A group of men dressed in Upheaval's outer sect uniform stood before the village altar. In front of them was a young man, blood dripping from the corners of his mouth. Quite a few villagers crowded around him. Quite a few of them puffed out their chests and stepped forward. Although they weren't even half as strong as Upheaval's members, they weren't afraid at all. "Hell, what? Do you want to fight us?" One of Upheaval's members, a fierce-looking man, sneered. He reached out and pulled at the villagers. The villagers felt a suction force pull them over. "What are you doing?" A ribbon flew towards a man with a whistling sound. The man glanced sideways and nimbly somersaulted backwards a few times. The ribbon fell to the ground and blasted a large crater where he had been standing. Gravel scattered all over the ground. The newcomer was none other than Zhuamo, who'd rushed over from the medicinal garden. Behind her were Xiao Ting and the young man. Zhuamo. The villagers all called out Zhuamo's name. The injured man walked over with the help of the villagers and gave her a look. So Zhuamo nodded, then pushed her right hand back. "What on earth do you want?" Zhuamo stared intently at the gang members. "What are we doing?" "We're collecting taxes, of course." One of Upheaval's outer sect members stepped forward, narrowed his eyes, and said, "Don't you know that the village you live in belongs to Upheaval? If you live here, you'll have to pay rent, just like you would in the city. You'll also have to pay taxes to mine and plant herbs. We've already informed you in advance. This time, we're here to ask for money." "How come I didn't know about that? You told me that Upheaval had been here before." Zhuamo's gaze darkened. She glanced at an elder at her side. This elder was the most respected man in Blue Cheelin Village. He was also the village chief. At that time, the village could still afford the money they wanted, so I didn't tell you. But this time, they've come even longer. Of course it has to be long. The last time I was here was half a year ago. Shouldn't you pay us half a year's rent as well? The outer sect members roared with laughter. Zhuamo pursed her lips. Don't go too far. She wouldn't ask how much Upheaval was charging. Firstly, even if she asked him, he didn't have the funds to help the village solve the problem. Secondly, from what the old village chief had just said, it was obvious that the money they wanted was beyond what the village could afford. Thirdly, these people were scoundrels. If he gave it to them, they would come back even more unscrupulously in the future. His eyes flashed with cold light, and the incredibly soft satin in his hand instantly became harder than steel. Immortal energy surged around him, forming cyclones that revolved around Zhuamo. He instantly released the aura of an immortal king. Not bad, not bad. It's been a long time since I've seen such a beautiful female immortal king. A young man walked out from Upheaval's group. He had sharp, slanted eyes, prominent cheekbones, and sunken eyes. His lips were slightly purple, and he wore a silver hoop at the corner of his mouth. His clothes were completely different from the others. That's Upheaval's probationary inner sect disciple. Someone in the village whispered. Although Blue Cheelin Village was isolated from the rest of the world, it wasn't completely isolated. Every year, they would go out to trade. Although they didn't stay in town for long, given Upheaval's current scope of influence, it was hard not to know them. Zhuamo furrowed her brows. The basic requirement to become a probationary inner sect disciple was to be an immortal king. Although she was also an immortal king, her equipment and Tao arts weren't as good as her opponents. If they really fought, her chances of victory were less than 40%. Pretty lady, we're just following the rules. Asking you to pay taxes and rent isn't what we want either. It's what the gang wants us to do. If you can pay 300,000 Celeste, I'll leave immediately. If not, then we'll have to resort to some extreme measures. The probationary inner sect disciple rubbed his chin, then glanced at Zhou Mo's curvaceous figure. Of course, if you're willing to come with me, then I'll help you collect your village's money. It's just 300,000 Celeste. I can afford such a small sum. Bullsh **T. The man who had been injured earlier roared. Wang Nan, step back. Leave this to me. Zhou narrowed her eyes at Upheaval's members. If you're following the rules, then please let me see your dispatch documents. If you can afford it, we'll pay you 300,000 Celeste, not a single cent less. If you can't, then I'm sorry, but we don't have the money. You really do know that barren hills and unruly rivers produce unruly people. The probationary inner sect disciple snorted sinisterly. Suddenly, his violent, immortal power surged forth like a geyser. I've already given you a chance. Either you hand over the money, or your entire village can forget about living. That's right, pretty lady. You can live. Mid-stage, immortal king. As soon as he released his immortal power, Zhou Mo had a rough idea of his strength. The basic requirement for ascending to the god realm was to be a peak immortal king and undergo tribulation. Zhou Mo was no exception. However, after ascending to the divine mountains, power was concentrated here. Right now, Zhou Mo was merely an early-stage immortal king. Besides, she wasn't good at fighting. Against a mid-stage immortal king, her chances of victory weren't just 40%, but rather 10%. The surrounding villagers' eyes blazed with fury. Quite a few of them wailed in grief. Is this really the benevolent and righteous teacher whose reputation spreads far and wide? They'd lived in Blue Cheelan village for generations, aloof from worldly affairs, but upheaval had shattered their peaceful lives. Even Zhou Mo couldn't help but clench her fists. This upheaval gang, they were truly too weak. You'd best scram. Let me tell you something. Big Sister Zhou Mo's Tao partner is Yi Zichen. Do you know that if he finds out you're bullying us like this, Big Sister Zhou Mo's Tao partner won't let you off? Lil Ting stood behind Zhou Mo, carrying a medicine basket on her back. She stuck her head out and roared at the gang members. At the mention of Yi Zichen, the gang members froze. However, an instant later, their eyes flashed with arrogance and disdain. Grandmaster Yi, you really have the guts to say such things. Let me tell you this. Grandmaster Yi is our brother Hao's master. How come we've never heard of him having a Tao partner? However, at that moment, a black-robed youth suddenly appeared in the center of the village. His handsome face was calm, and his pitch-black eyes were so deep they seemed to sink into oblivion. Everyone in the village, including Upheaval's probationary inner sect disciple, felt their hearts tremble. It was a shudder that came from the depths of their souls. Everyone felt a sense of reverence, and almost none of them dared look at the black-robed youth. Who is that? Both the villagers and the gang members were confused. The probationary inner sect disciple's eyes widened. The instant the black-robed youth appeared, he felt his immortal power grow chaotic and out of his control. Chapter 12:07. Meeting again. Upheaval's inner sect disciple's eyes flashed. His immortal spiritual energy was in complete chaos. Upheaval's competitiveness was growing by the day. Every inner sect disciple was the gang's most outstanding genius. The fact that he'd become an inner sect disciple was a testament to his strength. Even an ordinary Earth Supreme would find it difficult to make his immortal force this chaotic. Only the 9th-stage Earth Supreme demon race expert in the gang could make him feel this way. What terrified him even more was what the Black-Robe Man had just said. You. Now that the person she'd been thinking about every night had appeared before her, she didn't dare recognize him. In the past few years, Yi Zichen had changed far too much. He seemed more reserved and dignified than before. The black-robed youth looked at Zhuo and smiled. Zhuo, I'm here. Zichin. Inexplicably, Zhuo's tears flowed uncontrollably, and her eyes instantly moistened. She fought back her tears and stared straight at him. The villagers didn't dare look at Yi Zichin. Grandmaster Ye's name was infamous in the lower lands. They were all ordinary villagers, and they were afraid that they would offend this powerful being in some way. Xiaoting, however, didn't think too much about it. She simply blinked and peeked. She'd always been curious about Grandmaster Yi and Zhuo's Tao partner. She wanted to know if they had 3 heads and 6 arms. But now, it seemed they were just ordinary people. They weren't like the rumors, were they? Fire Qilins, dragons, or demons. When Yi Zichin saw Zhuo's reddened eyes, he reached out and tousled her hair. She didn't dodge at all. She allowed him to rub her head. Wang Nan felt a pang of jealousy, but when he remembered that this was Grandmaster Yi, he calmed down. He'd always felt that anyone worthy of Zhuo couldn't possibly be mediocre. He pursued Zhuo before because he didn't know she had a Tao partner. Now that he knew, and he was Grandmaster Yi, he couldn't bring himself to pursue her. All he could do was silently wish her well. All right, now that I'm here, everything is over. Yi Zichin's gentle voice reached Zhuo's ears. He tousled her hair and chuckled. Upheaval is my faction. If they come here to cause trouble, it's my fault for not disciplining them properly. Leave them to me. Thanks for your hard work. Yes. So Mo bit her lip and nodded, then took a few steps back. He watched her leave with a warm gaze, but when he turned back to face the other members of Upheaval, his eyes flashed with unquestionable dominance. Do you have anything to say? Grandmaster Yui. Upheaval started to speak, but Yi Zichin coldly cut him off. If you have anything to say, go back and say it to the elders. With a wave of his hand, Yi Zichin sent the gang members into the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. The surrounding villagers were dumbfounded. What kind of technique was that? It could actually wipe out several heaven immortals and immortal kings with just a wave of his hand. What's more, Yi Zichin's performance just now caused the villagers to mutter. This Grandmaster Yi was too overbearing. Upheaval is my faction. I sincerely apologize for all the trouble I've caused you, my fellow villagers. He bowed to the villagers of Green Shilin Village, and the villagers quickly returned the gesture. The village head laughed. Grandmaster Yi, you're being too serious. Although your faction has attacked our little village a few times, we've never suffered any substantial harm. Who said we didn't? Big Brother Wang Nan. One of the villagers spoke up. The injured Wang Nan immediately glared at him. Yi Zichin naturally didn't miss this petty action. He scanned Wang Nan's body with his divine sense and discovered that, based on how his blood was churning, he was indeed injured. Fortunately, his foundation was solid, so his injuries weren't particularly serious. Yi Zichin took out a bottle of medicine, then used his divine power to bring it to Wang Nan. Here's a bottle of medicine to help you recover. Grandmaster Yi, you absolutely can't. Wang Nan reached out and refused. Although he was injured, he'd intentionally avoided hitting his vitals, so his injuries weren't particularly serious. He'd often run into these kinds of minor injuries while hunting Yao, so they were nothing to him. No matter what, my people hurt you. Take it. Wang Nan, just take it, said Zhuo in support. Wang Nan hesitated for a moment, then clenched the bottle, cupped his fists, and turned to Yi Zichin. Many thanks. Yi Zichin nodded calmly, then turned his gaze to Zhuo. She was looking right back at him. This time, Yi Zichin didn't avoid her gaze. 100 years had matured his mind. He knew full well that while he could hide from her, he couldn't change her stubbornness. Zhuo, come with me. Where? Asked Zhuo. To Raging Flame City, replied Yi Zichin. Instantly, a hint of hesitation flashed through Zhuo's eyes. She glanced discreetly at the villagers behind her. Zhuo, go with Grandmaster Yi. Your future won't be limited to a small place like Blue Qilin Village, said the village head with a benevolent smile. That's right. Big sister Zhuo, haven't you been waiting for Grandmaster Yi? Now that he's come looking for you, don't hesitate any longer, urged Xiaoting. Practically every villager in the village said the same thing. But Zuo was a sentimental person. She'd lived with them for years. How could she let go of them just like that? At that moment, the village head stepped forward and bowed deeply to Yi Zichen. Grandmaster Yi, I have a favor to ask. Old man, what are you doing? Yi Zichen hurriedly dragged the village head to his feet. The village head turned to Wang Nan and said, Lil Nan is a talented and hard-working child. Given his talent, he's more than capable of developing in a bigger place. Unfortunately, he can't let go of us old fellows. We don't want to hold up his talent. So please, Grandmaster Yi, take him with you and leave. Yi Zichen had seen Wang Nan's talent. It wasn't particularly stunning, but it wasn't bad either. What's more, he'd managed to reach the peak of the sky immortal level in a village with such thin immortal energy. It was clear that he'd suffered quite a bit and hadn't slacked off in the slightest. There were plenty of geniuses in the God realm, but too few of them were patient enough. Sure, village head, I'm not leaving, said Wang Nan without even thinking about it. I have to stay and protect you. Silly child, the sky is high and the fish are free to swim. Staying here is far too much of a hindrance to your future. It's also a waste of the talent the heavens have bestowed upon you. Exploring the outside world is a good thing for you. Grandmaster Yi had agreed, but Wang Nan didn't. The village head couldn't help but frown and try to persuade him. Yi Zichen couldn't help but glance at Zuo. The two of them looked at each other, and it seemed like Yi Zichen understood something from her gaze. Then he looked at the old village chief and Wang Nan, who were still arguing endlessly. Chapter 1208. Arrangements. Yi Zichen had made this decision because he could tell that Zuo was reluctant to part with the villagers, and because he valued Wang Nan's character. However, as soon as he said it, he regretted it. He felt like his wording was a bit off, so he explained himself. Of course, I'm not forcing you to leave your homeland. Whether you leave or not is up to you. There's no need to worry too much about what I think. Azure Qilin Village had existed for nearly 10,000 years. Every generation had lived here. The villagers were actually somewhat hesitant to suddenly ask them to leave their homeland, especially the older ones. Their memories of the village were too deep, and they found it difficult to give it up. However, following Yi Zichen to Raging Flame City was a rare opportunity for many of the villagers, especially the younger ones. None of the villagers said anything. They waited quietly for the village head to speak. How about this? Wang Nan and the rest of you follow Grandmaster Yi to Raging Flame City. My old bones will. After a while, the village head hesitated. As soon as he said this, everyone expressed their stance. If you won't leave, we won't leave either. Fine. After going around in circles, they were back to square one. Yi Zichen clenched his right hand, then pointed in the direction of the blue Qilin villagers. In an instant, the villagers vanished into thin air. Let's go. Let's return to Raging Flame City. Zuo pressed her lips into a smile. She knew Yi Zichen was the one who'd made them disappear. Although she blamed him for his actions, he'd done it cleanly and directly. All right, let's go back. As evening approached, Yi Zichen returned to Raging Flame City's headquarters. This time, the immortal kings guarding the gates took note. When they saw Yi Zichen, they bowed respectfully. Yi Zichen nodded at them with a smile, then entered the Hall of Mental Cultivation. Your Excellency, you're back. Not long after entering the hall, Yu Zhilan walked out of the hall. When she saw Zuo was standing behind Yi Zichen, Yu Zhilan instinctively glanced at him. This was women's nature. When people of the same sex appeared together, they subconsciously compared each other. Whoosh! Nearly 100 people suddenly appeared in the hall, filling it to the brim. These were the villagers of Azure Qilin Village. Yu Zhilan was startled by the appearance of this group of villagers. The villagers looked around blankly. Find someone to make arrangements for these people. Assign them jobs according to their strength and find them a place to live. It's best if they can live together and not be separated. This subordinate understands. Yu Zhilan nodded. By now, even if the villagers of Qinglin Village were slow-witted, they would still know what was going on. Under the leadership of the old village chief, the villagers expressed their gratitude in unison. Their voices reverberated throughout the main hall. This is... A hint of hesitation flashed through Yi Zichen's eyes as he looked at Zuomo. Then his gaze flashed. This is my Tao partner. Find her a place to live. Zuomo's shoulders trembled as an indescribable joy appeared in her eyes. However, her eyes soon became misty again. 100 years. She had waited for 100 years, and this day had finally come. Yu Zhilan, who heard this news, was also shocked. She did not expect this person to be Lord Ye's Taoist companion. This seemed to be the first Taoist companion that Lord Yi had ever met. As for why she was the first, Yu Zhilan didn't want to explain. Your Excellency, since she's your Tao partner, how about I arrange for her to live in your residence? That's fine. Since things had come to this, there was no need to avoid suspicion. Yi Zichen didn't hesitate for long. He nodded. Your Excellency, is there anything else you'd like me to do? Is Wei Jie back? Upheaval was indeed powerful, but at the same time, there were bound to be flaws in its management. Yi Zichen had just witnessed. Although he'd already laid down countless rules and regulations, some people still harbored hopes of getting lucky. If the lower levels ran amok and the upper levels didn't take action, upheaval would eventually collapse. He's already back, said Yu Zhilan. Then tell him to come see me. There's nothing else. You can go and make the arrangements. Yu Zhilan led the villagers out of the hall of mental cultivation. Zuo followed them, glancing back every few steps as she left. Her eyes were filled with longing. In just a few breaths of time, Wei Jie hurried over, his face covered in dust. Your Excellency, you were looking for me? Wei Jie's eyes were bleary-eyed, and he looked exhausted. If this were any other time, Yi Zichen might have told him to rest, but he couldn't afford to waste time. Besides, he didn't have much time to waste. Yi Zichen released the gang members from the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. As soon as they landed, they noticed Wei Jie, gang leader. Wei Jie furrowed his brows, and his drowsiness returned somewhat. Although he didn't recognize them, he could tell from their uniforms that they were members of Upheaval. Wei Jie ignored the gang members and frowned. Your Excellency, what's wrong with them? Yi Zichen wouldn't have captured them for no reason. Furthermore, he'd called them over. Something must have happened. Let them explain themselves, said Yi Zichen coolly. Wei Jie's dignified gaze swept over the gang members. Under Wei Jie's pressure, the gang members told him everything that had happened. Gang leader, we were confused. After explaining everything, the gang members knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Wei Jie's expression was dark and unsightly. No wonder Yi Zichen hadn't looked particularly friendly when he'd called him over. Hadn't they been deliberately trying to make things difficult for him? Yi Zichen trusted him so much that he'd given him full authority over the gang, but his subordinates. Your Excellency, don't worry. I'll investigate this matter in detail. Not only will I investigate this thoroughly, but I also hope to put an end to this sort of thing in the future. Yi Zichen's eyes blazed like torches as he looked at Wei Jie. That includes everything that's happening right now, and everything that's about to happen. I hope you'll handle it appropriately. I also hope you'll be able to properly handle the people involved in this matter. Do you understand? I understand. Wei Jie lowered his head. Yi Zichen trusted that Wei Jie understood his intentions. He nodded. I won't say much else. At the end of the day, you're the gang leader. I gave you full authority over the gang because I trusted in your abilities. However, I'm disappointed in you, and I don't want to be even more disappointed. I definitely won't disappoint you, Your Excellency, replied Wei Jie without hesitation. Chapter 1209. See you on the Divine Mountain. During the past 2 months, Upheaval had been in constant motion. It was fair to say that Upheaval had undergone a complete transformation. Quite a few high-ranking members have been suspended from their posts, and over 10,000 of their members have been captured by Wei Jie and brought to Raging Flame City to await Yi Zichen's punishment. Your Excellency, here's a list of their names. Wei Jie and a group of Upheaval's higher-ups sat in the main hall. The list was handed to Yi Zichen. He glanced coolly at the densely packed names, then set it aside. It's my fault for failing to supervise them properly. These people tarnished Upheaval's reputation. When he saw Yi Zichen set the list down, Wei Jie hurriedly bowed and apologized. I've already dealt with these people. If I were to kill them all, it would make our gangs seem too vicious. That's why I feel that we should demote them to slaves and send them to distant lands to make up for their crimes. That's fine. Yi Zichen nodded at Wei Jia. However, there's no need to worry too much about these vile people. Just kill them. Sometimes, death is far more intimidating than simple labor. I understand. Wei Jia nodded, then retreated to the side. Having dealt with the gang's vermin, Yi Zichen's gaze landed on the information engineer he'd brought with him from the lower realms. How's the construction of the information network coming along? Emperor Yi, a thin, middle-aged man, walked out from the left side of the hall. He cupped his hands at Yi Zichen, then said, "Based on my speculations, we can't establish an information network here. However, we're too weak to do it. What level do you think we'll need?" "You'll need to be at least in Earth Supreme," said the information engineer. "From this day forth, upheaval will no longer restrict your resources. We'll provide you with any pills beneficial to your cultivation without limit. What you need to do is raise your cultivation to the supreme level as quickly as possible." Yi Zichen waved his hand, and the information engineer returned to his post. "If there's nothing else, you're all dismissed." Before long, everyone in the meeting hall left. Only Zui Mo remained. After everyone else left, she walked up to Yi Zichen and gently massaged his shoulders. "Don't give yourself too much pressure. Since you've chosen a leader for this gang, there's no need for you to do everything by yourself. You haven't had a good rest in the past 2 months. Thanks to Blue Qilin Village, Yi Zichen and Zhuomo's relationship had finally broken through. Over the past 2 months, their relationship had quickly warmed up. Yi Zichen sighed, reached out and patted Zhuomo's hand, then smiled at her. "How's the Chamber of Commerce? You don't have to worry about me. I've been doing business for 100 years. Do you still need to doubt my experience?" Zhuomo pursed her lips into a smile and massaged his shoulders. "Don't worry. One day, I will definitely make the 100 Treasures trading firm the #1 trading firm of the God race. If you have time, you should go rest." "I'm afraid it will be very difficult to rest." Yi Zichen shook his head and sighed. Zhuo couldn't help but frown. "What's wrong? You know that I'm an Earth Supreme now. Recently, I've clearly sensed this place rejecting me. My strength has stagnated, and it won't be long before I have to ascend to the Divine Mountains." Ever since Yi Zichen returned to the Divine Mountains as a Supreme, he'd sensed this place rejecting him. Previously, he'd been able to rely on his strength to suppress this rejection. But in the past 2 weeks, it was as if the rejection had turned on him. He was on the verge of losing control. Zhuomo's expression darkened. She'd just gotten a little nervous with Yi Zichen, and now he was about to leave. Out of selfishness, she didn't want him to leave. "Why are you the only one being rejected? Based on my understanding, there are quite a few Supremes in the lower lands. The Yao Supremes in your Yao Ceiling Pagoda are living well here too. The Yao and the Yao Ceiling Pagoda might be there because of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, but as for the God Race Supremes, I'm afraid they paid a hefty price to remain here. Based on my deductions, the price they paid was giving up on their own advancement. If there were no restrictions on Supremes in the lower lands, the situation would be completely different. They're definitely masters of the laws here as well. After becoming a Supreme, you absorb divine power from heaven and earth, which was practically negligible in the lower lands. If you wanted to stay here long-term, you'd be stuck here for the rest of your life." After a moment's hesitation, Zhuo didn't insist. As one of Yi Zichen's people, she would support his every decision. Besides, she knew exactly what Yi Zichen's goal was. Zhuomo's expression darkened, but she forced a smile. "When do you plan on leaving?" "Half a month from now." Yi Zichen had long since calculated the time. During this time, he'd do his best to take care of everything he could, then head to the Divine Mountains without distractions. That way, he wouldn't have to worry about upheaval even after he reached the Divine Mountains. "So soon?" Zhuomo's eyes flashed with inexplicable bitterness. Yi Zichen sensed her dispirited tone and reached out to grab her hand. "Why are you like this? It's not like we'll never see each other again. If there's a chance, I'll come down from the Divine Mountains to see you." "No need." To his surprise, Zhuo shook her head. I'm going to the Divine Mountains to find you." In the blink of an eye, half a month passed quietly. A dozen or so people stood by the side of an ancient path outside Raging Flame City. They'd all come because Yi Zichen was about to ascend the Divine Mountains. Yi Zichen had intentionally kept this news a secret. If he'd let it out, it wouldn't have been as simple as just a dozen or so people. "From now on, I'll leave upheaval to you." Yi Zichen stood in the middle of the path, his gaze landing on Wei Jie and the other elders. "Your Excellency, we definitely won't let you down," said Wei Jie solemnly. Wei Jie replied with a straight face, and the others nodded in agreement. Yi Zichen wasn't particularly worried about the pills. All Yao below the immortal king level of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda remained in upheaval's inner sanctum. Lei Zhun, one of the first floor's 3 commanders, stayed behind to stand guard, and the Parliament of Stars watched over them from a distance. Upheaval's development shouldn't be too difficult. Enough chit-chat. Let's part ways here. If they kept chatting, they might not be able to leave anytime soon. So, Yi Zichen decided to end the conversation, then cupped his hands at the crowd. "See you on the Divine Mountains." The others all wore solemn expressions. Only Zhuan Mo's eyes brimmed with disappointment, but she still smiled at Yi Zichen and wished him well. Chapter 12:10. Ascension to the Divine Mountains. For a long time, people believed that descending from the Divine Mountains was equivalent to reaching the God Realm, and that those who survived Immortal King Lightning Tribulation were considered gods. In reality, that wasn't the case. This was a misconception. The true definition of a god was to possess a divine spark. Only by ascending to the Divine Mountains could one be considered to have ascended to the God Realm. The rest of the Divine Mountains were nothing more than a transfer station. The God Realm had existed for over 100 million years. However, its history began with the Great War of Gods and Demons. The first God Emperor Zhui, established the God Realm's complete structure. The God Realm's complete structure was divided into 9 divine mountains, each of which had a long history. The leaders of the 9 divine mountains were also the 9 emperors of the God world. The 9 emperors were the highest existences in the God realm. No one knew for sure who was stronger or weaker among them. Outsiders could only assume that they were evenly matched. However, these 9 emperors were led by God Emperor Zhou Wu of the Central Divine Mountain, who intimidated all the races outside of the God realm. The Northern Divine Mountain structure was actually a vast, boundless sea called the Sea of Innocence. It flowed from the top of the Divine Mountain to the bottom. Of course, it wasn't entirely a sea. There was also land. The Northern Divine Mountain's ascension pool was guarded by a squad of 8 year-round. The squad rotated every 100 years to receive newly ascended Supremes. Right now, the 8 of them were chatting casually. "I guess we've run into some bad luck lately. I heard from our brothers from the other Divine Mountains that the number of ascenders on their side has skyrocketed. Our Northern Divine Mountain, on the other hand, hasn't had a single ascender in years. Our Northern Divine Mountain's location isn't particularly good, especially since it's surrounded by sea. It's only natural that the Supremes didn't choose to come here," snorted an older, middle-aged man. "If they don't come, it can only be said that they're short-sighted. Do they really think it's that easy to enter the Four Directions Palace or the God Emperor's Palace?" "Shoo!" The squad hurriedly signaled for him to keep quiet. "We're talking about the Four Directions Palace, not the Four Directions Palace." Tens of thousands of years ago, the Eastern Divine Mountain's Four Directions Palace hadn't changed its name. However, a few thousand years ago, Emperor Baiyan changed its name to the Four Directions Palace and ordered his subordinates to refer to him as Your Majesty. Many could tell that he was challenging Zhou Wu. However, whether it was Baiyan or Zhou Wu, they were not people that ordinary people could talk about. The slightly older middle-aged man also realized that he had made a slip of the tongue and quickly shut up. At this moment, the ascension pool next to the team began to rise, and all of them stopped chatting. "A supreme being has arrived." The woman in the group raised her eyebrows, and the rest of the people also stared at them. The job of guarding the ascension pool was very boring. The only fun was now. "How many do you think there are?" The others immediately shrugged and said, "How many more can there be? With this kind of tolerance, there definitely won't be more than 3. All of a sudden, The clouds in the ascension pool soared into the sky, and the clouds around the ascension pool expanded several times. I'm afraid there are at least a dozen people. The few people in the team looked at each other. Although they wouldn't get a raise for receiving more than 10 supreme martial artists at the same time, this was still enough for them to be proud of after a meal. How many people are in the Divine Mountains records right now? I think it's the easternmost Divine Mountains 4-direction palace's record, 12. Perhaps we'll break the record this time. As they chatted, the fog in the ascension pool grew thicker and thicker, and the eyes of the team guarding outside grew brighter and brighter. So many people are ascending at the same time. Could it be that they all know each other? If that's really the case, then the bandits outside are in for a calamity. In the God Realm, every divine mountain had such a faction, the bandits. The meaning of their existence was to plunder the wealth of newly ascended supreme beings. After all, newly ascended supreme beings were the weakest of the divine mountains. More than 40% of those who ascended actually died as a result. However, no one from the divine mountains ever interfered. The bandits were organized, and there were even rumors that they had diviner-level experts among them. If the divine mountains wanted to exterminate them, they'd suffer great losses. As a result, the divine mountains never made up their minds to eradicate the bandits. However, the various factions had come up with a few countermeasures. You can't say that. In the end, ascenders are just ascenders. They haven't received systematic instruction on how to use divine power, and they're only Earth Supremes. No matter how many of them there are, they're no match for those jackals. Someone in the team disagreed, then sighed softly. It's a good thing they're lucky. Next month is when the Academy starts recruiting students. If they can make it through the last few days, then they'll survive. Hey, why do you guys care so much? All we need to do is get them in touch. The others nodded. Indeed, they didn't need to worry about such things. What they needed to do was smoothly get the ascenders out of the ascension pool and explain the situation to them. As for whether they lived or died, that wasn't something they had to worry about. If he died at the hands of the bandits outside, then it could only be said that he wasn't tough enough. Right now, the only thing they cared about was how many ascenders were hidden within the fog. So, this is the Divine Mountains? Yi Zichen stood alone in the ascension pool. In truth, he'd been here for a while now. As soon as he arrived, he sensed boundless divine power pouring into his body, transforming his not-so-pure divine power into pure divine power. If his strength had been 1 before he'd ascended to the Divine Mountains, then now it was 10. The Divine Mountains are truly wondrous. The level of the lower lands is also much higher. Even with my strength, I can't see beyond 1,000 meters with my divine sense, nor can I fly. Yi Zichen looked at his fist and muttered to himself. The fog around him gradually dissipated. Spread out, spread out. How many people do you think are waiting for us inside? Asked the shortest youth in the team excitedly. There are about 20 of them. I think there's more than 20. Everyone had different opinions. They all stared intently at the dispersing fog around the ascension pool, slowly disappearing from their vision. Something's not right. At that moment, someone in the team blinked. It doesn't feel like there's a dozen or 20 people inside at all. The team outside the ascension pool frowned. When the fog completely dissipated, they saw Yi Zichen staring at them. He even waved at them. Hello, were you waiting for me? Chapter 12:11. A monster the team of 8 standing guard outside the ascension pool stared at Yi Zichen in shock, as if he were a rare animal waiting to be studied. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed. Yi Zichen gulped, then glanced at the group of uniformed people. Is there something strange about it? Where did everyone else go? Asked one of the team members. Yi Zichen was a bit taken aback by the question. He hadn't seen anyone else since arriving. There's no one else. It's just me. Just you? How is that possible? The youth who just questioned Yi Zichen raised his voice by several dozen decibels. The only woman in the team looked around the pool, then turned to the others and shook her head. Everyone else in the team was dumbfounded. How is that possible? Judging from the amount of mist in the Ascension Pond, it meant that there were at least a few dozen Earth sovereigns in the Ascension Pond. Yi Zichen was the only one in the pool. Could there be a problem with the pool? Everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. When they looked at each other, they could see the astonishment in each other's eyes. "Baiwei, come back." After a while, the slightly older, middle-aged man called her back, then cupped his fists and smiled at Yi Zichen. "Congratulations on ascending the Divine Mountains, brother." The others cupped their fists and congratulated Yi Zichen. What the hell was this? Although Yi Zichen didn't quite understand what was going on, since they were all congratulating him, he had no choice but to return the gesture. "Brother, you can leave the ascension pool now." When he heard that, Yi Zichen walked out of the ascension pool. When he emerged, he could sense the others peeking at him, their gazes unreadable. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Huang Yang, and I'm the captain of this team. The one who spoke to you is Fan Li, and this woman is Lu Baiwei. She's also our team beauty. As for the others, I won't introduce them one by one. In any case, we won't have a chance to meet again. If we do, we can introduce each other then." The slightly longer middle-aged man in the team said with a faint smile, "Our mission as a team of 8 is to receive the Supremes who have ascended from the lower Divine Mountains. We rotate once every 100 years. You've come at the right time. If you were any later, we would have rotated out, and you would have been received by another team." Yi Zichen gained a rough understanding of them. Before he could introduce them, a golden document suddenly fell from the sky. Lu Baiwei leaped up and grabbed the document, then looked it up and down a few times before pointing at Yi Zichen with wide eyes and exclaiming, "It's Yi Zichen! Wow, you! What happened? What happened?" Fan Li and the others also came forward and said what was written on the document. "Ascender Yi Zichen, born at 1400 hours of the 17th of August, calendar of Zhou Wudi, 47832. Third stage, Heavenly Supreme in the Soul Realm. Seventh stage, Heavenly Supreme in the Origin Realm. Absolute talent." Really? Wow. Everyone else had exaggerated expressions on their faces. Even Huang Yang's eyebrows twitched. However, when he wanted to take a closer look, the document had already melted into a crystal card. "We actually managed to get in touch with a monster like that." Yi Zichen's expression was blank as he probed. "Well, genius. Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Fan Li. I've been on the Divine Mountains for about 300 years. If you're lucky enough to enter Skyspan Academy, you can call me Senior Brother." Fan Li was a skinny young man. His excitement could be seen from his eyes, and he gripped Yi Zichen's hand tightly without letting go. "Well, I'm Lu Baiwei. I've been on the Divine Mountains for 100 years. And me, what was going on now?" This sort of warmth made Yi Zichen feel a bit uneasy, but he was more concerned about the document. Why had it written all of his information? It even listed his cultivation level. "All of you back off. What are you doing?" Fortunately, Huang Yang furrowed his brows and shouted. Only then did they back away from Yi Zichen. Who would have thought? "Brother Yi, I'm Huang Yang. I've been on the Divine Mountains for 1,000 years, and I'm currently a 9th stage Earth Supreme. I'm on the verge of breaking through to the Sky Supreme level. I know that with your talent, you'll definitely become a dragon among men. If you can remember us, that would be our blessing." Yi Zichen's smile stiffened. "Can we talk things out?" "No problem." Huang Yang let go of Yi Zichen's hand, retreated half a meter, and looked at Yi Zichen with a friendly smile. Although the gazes still made Yi Zichen uncomfortable, at least they'd given him a comfortable distance. Yi Zichen let out a sigh, then spoke up. "To tell you the truth, you left me in a daze just now." "We were too rash," said Huang Yang sternly. Huang Yang said sternly, "Actually, before Brother Yi landed in the ascension pool, we made a bet on the number of ascenders in the pool. Based on the density of the clouds, we judged there to be around 20, but Brother Yi appeared on your own, which surprised us. But now that the decree has descended and the higher-ups have judged Brother Ye's talent to be peerless, everything makes sense now." The others nodded in agreement. "Then I'm a bit curious. How did that decree appear just now?" asked Yi Zichen in confusion. If an ordinary person had asked, the team outside the Ascension Pond would have given them an explanation. All they had to do was to contact the Ascenders and briefly explain the situation of the Divine Mountains to them. Anything else wasn't their job. But Yi Zichen was different. He was a peerless monster. How the decree appeared on the divine mountains is a mystery as well. No one knows where it came from, but every time an ascender appears, a decree descends. In the end, the decree condenses into a crystal card, which contains all of the ascender's information. While Huangyang was explaining, Lu Baiwei handed over her crystal card. There seemed to be a note under the crystal card. This kind of small action naturally fell into the eyes of the others, but no one made too much of a fuss. The way they saw it, there was nothing strange about Lu Baihui's actions. She was a peerless monster, after all. Who wouldn't want to get involved with her? Is this a way to contact me? Yi Zichen glanced at the dense handwriting on the slip of paper, then smiled politely, not at all embarrassed. He put the slip of paper into his pocket, then looked at the crystal card. The crystal card was light blue, and Yi Zichen's basic information was written on it. Brother Yi, you probably noticed by now that the crystal card is made of special material. Even rulers can't destroy it. Only with this card can you enter the God realm. Without it, you'll be considered an outsider. Brother Yi, you have to take good care of this crystal card. Huangyang's gaze was solemn as he explained the card's importance. Yi Zichen, on the other hand, had a simple definition for it. Chapter 12:12. Skyspan Academy. There was no mistaking this description. Only with a crystal card could you live in the God realm. Without one, you were unregistered. If this was an ID card, what else could it be? Yi Zichen also tried to destroy the crystal card. With his abilities, it wasn't hard for him to split mountains, but it was completely useless against the crystal card. I'll take good care of it. Yi Zichen put the card away, then asked, "What's this Skyspan Academy you mentioned? What's this Skyspan Academy you were talking about?" Skyspan Academy was established by the Northern Divine Mountains Sea of Innocence. Its purpose was to reduce the death rate of ascenders, replied Huangyang. Death rate? Yi Zichen arched his brows. That's right. Huangyang nodded. Ordinary ascenders are early-stage Earth Supremes. In the lower lands, they're considered the strongest, but on the Divine Mountains, they're the weakest. In truth, the situation on the Divine Mountains isn't as good as outsiders think. Roughly 70% of ascenders die. 70%. That meant that out of 100 ascenders, 70 would die. That wasn't a low death rate. Ordinary ascenders only have a superficial understanding of the Divine Mountains, and they don't know the first thing about using divine power. That's why, in order to reduce the death rate and to systematically teach them how to use divine power, the Divine Mountains established academies to teach them. That's quite humane. Yi Zichen couldn't help but nod. It was just like when he'd first arrived in the lower lands. At the time, he really didn't know anything. He'd only survived because he was strong enough to crush everyone there. But the Divine Mountains were different. Sky Supremes were everywhere, and diviners and rulers weren't rare. There were far too many people capable of crushing him to death, and he'd offended quite a few of them. When he ascended, he'd considered going to the Sea of Innocence. If push came to shove, he could just shamelessly ask Little Hong Hong or the Wish God for help. Although that would be a bit embarrassing, at least he'd be able to keep his life. But now that Skyspan Academy existed, he didn't have to embarrass himself. Then can you tell me how I can get into Skyspan Academy? Next month is Skyspan Academy's enrollment day. Brother Yi, all you need to do is show this crystal card and you'll be accepted. The normal length of schooling is 5 years. After passing the final examination, you can choose to extend your schooling in the academy. Of course, you will have to pay a certain fee. With that, Huangyang took out a jade tablet and handed it to Yi Zichen. He poured his divine power into the slip, and a map of the northern Divine Mountain appeared. Each of the mountain's 86 cities was clearly marked. In the center of the countless cities was a red dot. That was probably the Skyspan Academy they'd been talking about. There was also a region marked in the upper left corner of the map, the Northern Divine Mountains Sea of Innocence. That was where Hong Hong and the Wish God lived. Yi Zichen memorized their approximate locations, then returned the jade slip. Brother Yi, you don't have to give it back to me. Anyone who ascends to the sacred mountain will be given a simple map of the sacred mountain. Huangyang smiled and pushed the jade scroll back. I see. Yi Zichen nodded. Many thanks, then. I'm deeply grateful that you've all answered my questions. Since Skyspan Academy is recruiting next month, I won't waste any more time. I'll be heading to Skyspan City. Brother Yi, if you don't mind, you can come with us. In half a year, we'll have someone meet with us. When the time comes, we can travel together. It'll be safer that way. Although it'll delay your enrollment, given your talent, even if you go half a year late, it'll still be. Thank you for your kind intentions, Brother Huang, but I don't want to be too high profile. Yi Zichen cupped his hands and smiled. Farewell. Yi Zichen didn't dare stay with them for half a year. Just now, their gazes, especially Liu Baihui's, made it seem like they wanted to eat him alive. If he stayed with them for half a year, who knew what would happen? Huang Yang and the others watched Yi Zichen leave and sighed in desolation. This was peerless talent. The Divine Mountains had probably never seen such a monstrous genius in 10,000 years. If only they could use this opportunity to form some sort of relationship with him. Don't look anymore. He's gone. Huang Yang sighed helplessly. Liu Baihui looked dejected, while the others hung their heads in dejection. Until, hey, did we miss something? Family suddenly furrowed his brows. Didn't we tell him where he could go and where he couldn't? That. The surrounding people were all stunned. Soon after, they all shifted their gazes to Huang Yang. Just now, he'd said most to Yi Zichen. He knew best whether he'd said anything or not. I don't think so. Huang Yang gulped. This was his first time meeting a peerless genius. Even he was a bit excited, so much so that he'd forgotten what he should have said. What should we do? There's no way we can chase after him now, but there are a few cities on the way to Skyspan City that the bandits are guarding. If he just barges in, it'll be fine if he gives in, but if he doesn't, then he... Family didn't dare finish his sentence. Everyone else had a solemn look on their faces. Huang Yang sighed while holding his forehead. Let's just hope his luck gets better. Yi Zichen followed the marks on the map. He'd already been rushing at top speed for over 6 hours. How strange. The difference between the Divine Mountains and the lower lands isn't much different. The divine power outside the cities is so wild that I can't absorb it. Yi Zichen originally wanted to find a secluded place to rest, but the divine power outside was simply too wild. He had no choice but to hurry and find a city to rest before sunset. Another few hours passed, and night fell one after another. Since he couldn't fly, he had to walk. This was extremely taxing on his energy. With great difficulty, Yi Zichen made it to a city in the wee hours of the night. Although it was already late at night, the city was still brightly lit. Countless fiery red lanterns hung from the city walls, as if to light the way home for travelers. There are so few people in the city. Yi Zichen thought the city would be similar to the lower lands. He thought he'd see densely packed residents. To his astonishment, there were pitifully few people in the city. He didn't see a single person the entire way. Yi Zichen hesitantly walked up to a restaurant and rubbed his spatial ring. Although he didn't know if the money here was the same as in the lower lands, he had quite a few useless treasures and pills. If worse came to worst, he could use them to make up for it. Yi Zichen calmly walked into the restaurant. As soon as he entered, he shouted, "Waiter, here's some good food and drinks for you. Give. What was going on?